on right now. So, Mr. Jay Webster.
Morning, Commissioners. Morning, Judge. Things change faster than I can keep my notes going. So I'm going to go over this real quick. Basically, what I'm going to do is going to cover some Hood County facts. As of right now, we have 6 positive COVID-19 cases. 2 are considered from community spread brought into our community from other places, such as Fort Worth and Dallas. Our adjoining county, Erath County, has 2 new cases that happened over the weekend. So that puts them up to 3. And Johnson County is up to 8. Over the weekend, too, Somerville County issued a stay-at-home order as well. Based on what we've been listening to and the experts that we've been given advice to, that basically once you start getting your first or second positive, you'll start doubling that every 3 days. So we'll see if that holds true. Right now it is. It's Friday when we spoke. We had 3 cases, and here I am today. We have 6, so we doubled in 3 days. Kind of give you some quick facts of what's really reality for us. Hood County has 60,182 in population. 21,206 fall in the high-risk category of 65 age or plus. Currently, at Lake Granbury Medical Center, we had 30 beds available to put those people in, but prior to arriving here, I received a phone call. That now is at 29 because one of our positive COVID cases is being rushed to the hospital with serious breathing issues, which means that out of the total 5 available ventilators that we had this morning, we now have 4. To put this into perspective, 0.002% of just our high-risk population is what we can serve. So 0.02% is what we can take care of just in the high-risk population with our hospital. So what we're doing is to help protect our healthcare community. Everyone has been asked to slow the process or flatten the curve to prevent exceeding our healthcare capabilities. At the rate the virus is spreading, without slowing it down, we would cripple or wipe out our healthcare response and capabilities, as you can tell from the numbers above. Second point is supplies for our healthcare facilities is very critical. So again, the measures we put in place benefit these frontline workers. By hopefully not having to treat as many people, our hospital is not equipped to handle even 1/3 of what is currently going on in Dallas County. So by acting now, constantly requesting and practicing social distancing, putting measures in place through our declaration of shelter at home and limit your movement in the community, we are doing our part to flatten the curve and protect our community. The best way overall to avoid or slow the spread is to limit people from being exposed at this time. So within 30 minutes, and we're probably going to have another positive one because one of the person that's being transported this morning, his wife is also sick, and she's been having to take care of this person with severe underlying issues that's positive, then it's more than probably she's positive as well, but she hasn't been tested. So those are the numbers as we speak right now. We're waiting to see. Dr. Blocker will cover that here in a minute. Between 11 and 1 is when we get our next update on tests that have been done. We've tested 100 people as of today. If we'd have had half of those show up positive, we'd be in some serious trouble. We've just been lucky that we only have the 6 that we're aware of right now.
Jay, are they in the hospital, the 6, or are they home quarantine? Or?
So the answer to that question is 5 of them are at home and 1 is being transported to the hospital as we speak. Ricky Reeves, our EMS director, called me this while ago to let me know that they were responding to one of the residents to pick up one of our COVID patients because he was having difficulty breathing and was having to be sent to the hospital. So we have one of those.
This hospital? Okay.
Yes, sir.
You said severe underlying issues with this patient. What is that?
He has other type of issues, medical issues.
And the reason I bring that up is I looked at statistics from Travis County on Friday as of noon, and Travis County is reporting 160 cases confirmed as of noon and 1 death. related to coronavirus. I scrolled down and looked at this data on that, and thankfully there was actually data on that patient, and it was a female over 70 years old with substantial underlying issues. So I just want to point that out for the record, that I don't know what's going on with this particular patient, but I certainly think we need to know the information behind these ones that are having to go to the hospital.
Well, we've had as young as a 2-year-old die all the way up to an 80-year-old die. The causes are unknown in a lot of those. In our high-risk population, most of those do have underlying issues, but it seems to enhance those underlying issues when they get to COVID. And so they probably would have been able to handle their underlying issues if they hadn't got the virus on top of that. And that's the data that you're seeing is the underlying issues. It seems that the COVID is attacking those and making those underlying issues even worse.
Yeah, well, I got some statistics to go over in a bit, so I appreciate that.
Are there only 5 ventilators in our hospital?
We have a total of 9. All the rest are being utilized. So we only have 4 that we can access right now.
Right now.
Yes, sir.
Anybody else have any questions for Mr. Webster?
It might be for David. I'll ask Jay. How about testing? I see on the news where there's you can get tests now and get the results back in anywhere from 45 minutes to 5 minutes. Are we anywhere close to having anything like that we could start testing our first responders, medical staff, and do more testing? Or where does that stand?
I'll let him back me up on this, but as the Abbott testing that was made available that's being pushed out, that's be able to have your results in 5 to 45 minutes, based on what I was told or heard yesterday and told, is they're a week out from getting that Abbott test all out into the field to be able to do it. Now, our first responders can go to one of the drive-through deals anytime they want to get tested, but those tests are still 3 to 5 days.
The quickest I've seen a return so far is about 48 hours on any of the tests that I've looked at.
Anything else? Okay, thank you, Mr. Webster. Dr. David Blocker.
Judge, Court, appreciate the commissioners. Appreciate the opportunity to come and share with you today. And regarding as far as what we know so far in regards to impact of the COVID-19 virus on our community and the measures that we have been able to enact so far. As you know, we are in essentially a bedroom community for the Dallas-Fort Worth area, which has 7.5 million people and is the 4th largest metropolitan area in the United States and one of the largest in the world. Followed closely after that by Houston, which has 7 million people. So I think it's important when we look at statistics for epidemiology and outbreaks and things like that, what we see going on in our larger cities, particularly Dallas-Fort Worth area, is we have to pay very close attention to that because we do have the majority of people who live in Hood County routinely either work or interact with the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And so we truly have an international impact, even in our small community here. That being said, we obviously have limited resources when it comes to healthcare and public health responses. As we've discussed in the past, I am a physician with a lot of public health experience, over 20 years of public health experience and a master's in public health myself, which is unusual, particularly in a community like this. I happen to have gained that experience in the military and retired here just about 1.5 years ago, and am happy to serve as the appointed public health authority to interface between Hood County and Texas Department of State Health Services. However, with that in mind, the public health infrastructure here is really non-existent, and we rely entirely upon remote support from Texas Department of State Health Services Region 2-3, which has medical director that covers 49 counties, including ones like ours, and has a number of staff that are committed to epidemiologic tracking on a regular basis, whether COVID-19, influenza, tuberculosis, other sexually transmitted illness, you name it. And that those regional Texas State Health Resources are being fully, brought to bear to support this in our region. But again, that region includes all of Dallas-Fort Worth, includes these other areas that have health departments. Tarrant County has somewhere on the order of 150 or more people who work for Tarrant County Health Department, Public Health Department. And so when we talk about access to testing, bringing tests online, using medical resources to help in this crisis, I think it's really important, again, that we put that in context when we see the numbers being reported and we look at the lag in reporting times and getting information back. So as Mr. Webster shared earlier, here in our community, we have right now 6 positive cases, but we have 95 people that have been tested. And just over half of those tests have returned negative so far, okay? But that includes a number that have been hospitalized or tested through the hospital, 16 pending tests. Some of those include patients currently hospitalized in those hospital beds that Mr. Webster was relating earlier. We have another 26 pending tests out in the community that I am aware of that have been done either through Lake Granbury Medical Center, Lakeside Physicians, or other large medical groups here in town. They have a requirement, just as does every medical facility or clinic or hospital, to report those again to Texas Department of State Health Services when they have a positive test. Right now, Department of State Health Services doesn't even have the resources to test and follow up on the contacts and all of the negative tests. So again, we have a lag in not just our community, but even in our public health region, as far as being able to follow up in a timely manner to know what's going on in our community. And therefore, the CDC guidelines, the Texas Department of State Health Service guidelines, remain incredibly important to the health of our individuals, not just those who are currently known to be exposed or currently have pending tests, but to their close contacts, which is defined as family members or close coworkers who routinely are within 3 to 6 feet of these people for more than 2 hours is considered to be a close contact, okay? So when you start to expand that, whether you're looking at healthcare workers, family members, et cetera, there are lots of ways that this particular virus can spread very quickly in a community, in any community, including ours. And again, testing capabilities limited to those locations, and tracking and contact follow-up is currently non-existent for our county. So again, we truly don't know until we have someone that requires hospitalization, or we know about the follow-up with folks and contacts that are at home. So again, the following CDC guidelines, following Texas Department of State Health Services recommendations, social distancing and self-isolation are the most important things that any community can do right now in the midst of this COVID-19 crisis, because we truly, as you heard already, don't have a healthcare infrastructure to take care of large numbers of people if they suddenly become ill. So across the state of Texas, as of yesterday, over the weekend, what we know about is there have been over 25,000 tests administered, with 2,500 cases reported, so about 10% of those that have been tested across the state, which again includes our large metropolitan areas, includes small counties like ours. About 10% of those tested have come back positive for COVID-19, and there have been 34 deaths across the state of Texas. Again, that's the latest statistics I can pull up right at this moment. So again, doing the math on that, that means about 1.3% or 13 out of 1,000 who have been diagnosed with COVID-19 have died in the state of Texas so far. 34 deaths out of 2,552 positive cases. So this is what we know. Again, as Mr. Webster shared, and as we hear, whether you're listening to the President or CDC or Dr. Fauci from our National Advisor on immunologic and infectious diseases, what we know in Texas or in any community is still most likely the tip of the iceberg as we walk through this wave of infectious spread. So we talk about isolation for 14 days for any given case in those contacts, because we know this particular virus can take up to 14 days to have positive symptoms. The problem with the community is you have to look at multiple cycles, and that's why CDC recommendations talk about social distancing efforts, really needing to be enacted up to 8 weeks or so to really know if they've had a full effect on the community. As I shared in the emergency operations discussion that we had last week, we believe, based on the best models that we can get a hold of right now for Texas and for this area, that that social distancing measures could potentially decrease the total number of cases that end up ill with COVID-19 and the total number of hospitalizations and therefore total number of deaths ultimately by 40% or more in any community if the social distancing and isolation measures are followed very closely. So again, that's the best recommendations I have based on the epidemiology that we know historically from previous pandemic outbreaks. In the past, we've had 4 pandemic outbreaks of influenza in the last 100 years that we know about that have impacted the United States, okay, including Spanish flu. 1918 is the one that's most notable, but there have been others. Again, when you look at communities that practiced early and very drastic social distancing, they had, when it's all said and done, when the smoke cleared, again, 2 to 3 months later after the initial outbreaks, they had a much significantly decreased number of overall cases, number of deaths, number of impacts on their health care. So when we hear officials talk about flattening the curve, the epidemiologic curve, they're not just talking about that 1-2 week transmission, they're talking about over the course of a period of months. And so for Hood County and this part of Texas, it's estimated that we won't really know the impact of the measures that we take now until June or July timeframe. And if you listen to the news, if you look at the advisors at the national level or New York City or other places that have a very large impact, much more crowding, much more closer together, you'll hear similar things from those other health advisors, again, CDC, Texas Department of State Health Services. So the challenge for us is whether or not we want to treat Hood County as an extension of Dallas-Fort Worth, this large international metropolitan area, and take similar measures as we see in Dallas County and Tarrant County, et cetera, or if we believe that we're far enough away that we can continue to have more of business as usual, life as usual. And I personally, as a medical professional, as a parent, as a father, as a doctor, with elderly and ill family members here in Hood County myself, I think that would be a mistake if we don't at least look and consider at continuing to be a little bit more severe on the short-term measures, understanding they may have some economic impacts, significant economic impacts. And again, they're not isolated to here in Hood County, but we as a community, we as individuals, we as families, we can get through economic crises and things like that. What we can't get through is having a decimation of our population and losing so many loved ones, old and young. So that's the balance. They've talked about the dilemma for leaders at every level. If we take more drastic measures now and then our community does well, folks will come back later and say, well, we shouldn't have taken those measures. If we don't take measures, we find out, a month from now that we have a higher proportion of illness and deaths and things like that in our community. Well, it's too late. So that's the challenge. I'm happy to answer any specific questions for what I can give you right now. Based on the medical, my medical knowledge, based on the epidemiology, based on historical data. But you as leaders, have to make the best decision you can for our county.
Temperature. I've been hearing outside temperature kind of deters the virus. Is that correct or not? The higher the temperature gets, the less dangerous it is. Is that correct?
I think it's still too early to say with this particular COVID-19 virus, what the impacts are going to be. There are some differences from influenza and other viruses. So I think it's still too early to say.
Okay.
I've got a question, sir.
Yes, sir.
And I appreciate everything you guys are doing, and but I do have some questions, and one of them, at least this is some data that I've been looking at this, studying this since we started, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, because there may be an update, but as of yesterday, and I don't know if that was yesterday or Friday's numbers, but I'm seeing a worldwide death toll of about 34,000 with this, attributed to this. Does that sound correct to you?
Possibly. I haven't looked at the World Health Organization numbers in the last 24, 48 hours. But,
okay.
yeah.
And I'm just trying to put things into perspective. I'm not arguing one way or the other right now. I mean, I'm taking you at your word, and I understand your position as a doctor. You certainly want to be as safe as you can, and I understand that. But here's another interesting statistic that I want to put out there. Every day, this is straight from the CDC. 7,452 people die every day in the United States, every day. And the best data that I've got for an entire year is from 2017. And the deaths related to respiratory, flu, and pneumonia in 2017 in the U.S. is 216,000 is their number. And so I'm putting that out there because I'd like to have other numbers out there for us to think about while we're talking about this, because I want to separate hysteria from facts. And that's what I'm after today, at least to have a discussion about that. Are you okay with that?
Commissioner Eagle, I am entirely in support of making fact-based decisions and not emotion-driven decisions. I think it's important to recognize that seasonal influenza has a huge impact across our community, across our country, and our community here every year, right? And there's no question about that. And similar to this coronavirus, a large number of people may be exposed to any virus, coronavirus, influenza virus, rhinovirus, adenovirus. There's literally dozens of, if not hundreds of different viruses in our community right now. And they do have seasonal impacts. We're coming to the tail end of the flu season this year. But influenza, known deaths related to influenza in our region, have a significant impact every year. I gave those numbers earlier. I don't have them right in front of me here, but about 3 weeks ago, we were looking precisely at that. What's been the impact of flu this particular year in Dallas-Fort Worth area? Because again, that's where the numbers are collected in the region 2-3 by Public Health Services. And what do we project as related to COVID-19? And I think, again, we simply don't have enough facts overall, whether you're looking at worldwide or nationwide or Texas-wide, to really totally know when it's all said and done. But we do know that less than 1% of people who are documented as being positive for flu, because we do have those rapid flu tests, so we do collect those at the public health level, less than 1% end up dying in our community, in this region, which includes Dallas-Fort Worth. Less than 1% end up dying. Across Texas right now, what we know with limited testing capability, so again, only the sickest people or the people who are known to meet criteria right now get tested, because there may be 80% of any given population that either have mild or no symptoms, similar to flu, and so they're developing their own immunity without ever going to a doctor, and maybe only exposing them and their families. So again, we just simply don't know what the numbers will be, because the tests aren't readily available right now for COVID-19 as compared to flu tests. Anyone can go to any doctor's office to get a flu test. So we know for people tested for flu, I don't remember the exact percentage of hospitalizations, but we have had less than 1% that have died from flu. For people that we know so far that have been tested for COVID-19, which again is selective more for people who we know have been exposed or people who are hospitalized and have comorbidities, we've had 1.3% have died across the state of Texas. That's all. Those are the only facts I have right now. And Commissioner Eagle, that's one of the most concerning pieces to me. But part of that, then you have to back that up to availability of hospital beds, availability of health care, and things like that, because again, a lot of those people, the majority of those people, whether it's influenza deaths or COVID-19 deaths, they do have comorbidities. The one we're talking about here in town right now has chronic pulmonary disease, so he already has difficulty breathing, as well as high blood pressure. And those are two of the most common problems in the communities at risk. So they're most likely to get pneumonia, get influenza, get COVID-19, what have you. With COVID-19, it has a very rapid progression to respiratory failure. So, lungs will fill up with fluid, complications of both this virus and other complications. So that's why, again, those hospital beds and the number of ventilators that become so very important in these COVID-19 conversations, because across our community, we have very limited availability of those. And we've talked with Glen Rose Hospital, we've talked with Stephenville, Weatherford, Cleveland, and of course, if you have more severe illness that we can't handle here locally, what do we normally do? We'd send them into Dallas-Fort Worth. Well, they have the same issue. They have much larger populations, and they already have a large number, if, you know, the majority of their beds already filled with patients, because they've got to deal with their population first. So it would be different if we're talking about an isolated issue that's just happening in Hood County or its environs. Something happened out at the power plant or something like that that only affects us, and then we could roll over into all those resources and everybody be coming from Dallas-Fort Worth to help us out. When you have a epidemic or a pandemic crisis, which by definition means that all these communities, every community is affected, then each community has to look first at their resources and then share with what's left. And we simply have to share with all of Dallas-Fort Worth. So we can't really count on those outside resources, whether they're coming from CDC or whether they're coming from the Texas Department of State Health Services or our region trauma advisory council. I mean, a lot of great resources out there, and we have folks in our community tied directly into those. But we have to look first and foremost with what we have in Hood County, how to best leverage those resources. And that, again, that's the best I can advise you. I hope I didn't go too far off track. I want to respect the time of the, you know, of the commissioners and the judge here. But again, I just want to make sure we've got accurate information in front of you.
So we don't have anywhere else to go, so let's get this. I would like to make sure we cover this very well. So I appreciate what you, and just for the record, my grandson, I'm very concerned about. He's 11 years old and he has asthma. So I understand the fear that one has about a family member. But still, I'm looking for more facts. But I appreciate what you've given us. Thank you.
Certainly. Certainly.
I'll tell you what,
yes.
Dr. Blocker, I got a question for you. I spent some time this weekend with the residents of my community, and they haven't had too big of an issue with the trying to stay indoors or as much as possible. What they're having an issue is when they see people in, you know, mass people in grocery stores and
right.
That issue. What can you do? What can we do to keep people safe in grocery stores? And because they see them in the convenience stores, and they see a lot of traffic in the Home Depot or Lowe's. You know, they ask me, well, you know, certain businesses can run and shut down, and these businesses are just blowing and going. You see just, you know, big gatherings in them.
Right. Right. So no, I appreciate you bringing that up, Commissioner White, because that's a huge challenge for our community, any community, because you have the individual responsibilities and the rights of every Texan or every American to do what they're allowed to do and what we're used to doing. And then you have these fairly severe, very severe restrictions right now on working conditions and where you can go and what can be open and what can't. And so the goal is to try to protect critical infrastructure for people to be able to have access to groceries, to be able to have access to building materials and things like that. And at the same time, we expect our community to respect that and respect their neighbors. So then you get into a challenge of how do you police that and how do you enforce that? So from a public health standpoint, you know, we have the Centers for Disease Control recommendations that go out across the U.S. We have the governor's very specific recommendations, and then, you know, his advice to, again, county judges and city leaders and commissioners like yourselves to try to find the best way to interpret that for a given community. Again, of course, I know that's exactly why we're meeting today, right? Is because you have to make some difficult decisions about what to do, how long to maintain those restrictions. And I just told you the safe answer is 8 weeks from the time that the community is exposed, which we're already exposed, we're in that period. That's the safe answer, okay? And it could be longer, could be shorter, depending on what's going on in the world around us. But the fact is, none of us wants to stay cooped up for a weekend, much less 8 weeks, right? And then again, there's that impact on the community, on those jobs, on those businesses, and things like that. So the critical infrastructure, such as medical care, such as grocery stores, such as all this, every one of those different organizations and industries has their own guidance that's gone out as far as what they should or shouldn't do. So if you're a large corporation like Lowe's, Home Depot, Walmart, H-E-B, et cetera, they have corporate guidance and corporate medical directors that are advising them. And I happen to know some of those folks, you know, that after, you know, working in this field for so long. But they're doing just that for their workers and their staff, and trying to find the best road ahead as far as what do they do? Do they put people at the door similar to the sheriff testing temperatures coming into this room? Do they put things on the floor that say stay 6 feet away from the next person checking out in line? But then how much can they police when folks are out in the aisles of the store? How much is self-policing? I know myself, having been in Kroger this past week, this is my personal example, grocery shopping with my family, There were some people that wouldn't even enter the same grocery aisle with me and my wife because they didn't want to have anybody breathing on them. But after I walk away from the aisle, they may be touching the same can of beans that I touched. So somewhere in there, the personal protection, as far as cleaning surfaces, as far as hand sanitizer, as far as if you have to touch something, don't touch your eyes or face or nose afterwards, those personal protections still have to be enacted, as well as to protect the workers and the people and allow the capability to get groceries, to shop for essential items. So how much can we afford to police in our community or any community? Can we put sheriffs in and down the aisles? Do we trust those businesses to police themselves and provide the best advice they can? When it comes to public health law, what's been enacted in the state of Texas by Commissioner Hellerstadt and by Governor Abbott gives some very specific guidance and gets into the different Class B misdemeanors and things. If someone is actively coughing and appears to be sick and they're clearly not following the rules, that shop owner has the ability to send them away or even to call law enforcement to say, hey, you are a risk to public health and safety. Right now, in our community, for the moment, we have similar guidelines in place to limit the number of people to come together, to say, hey, only these businesses should be open. So you have some other business, if you have a restaurant that's having everybody outside on the patio rather than respecting the limits of 10 or less and takeout only and those kinds of things, well, then we have a capability to enforce that. If somebody calls law enforcement, if the shop owners don't already take care of it themselves, and if law enforcement gets there and the people don't want to leave and don't want to follow those guidelines, they have the ability to serve and treat with them appropriately. So those protections are currently in place, again, across the state of Texas and then more specifically in our county. That gets back to the nitty-gritty. How much do we want to put in place and how much can we afford to enforce versus expecting our citizens to respect that, or visitors to our county for that matter, to expect that even though visiting is limited at this time, there are still people that are here in Hood County that aren't Hood County residents. And so we have to expect them to follow the same rules as everybody else who lives here. So I hope I answered that question as best I can, Commissioner White.
Yeah, they were just wondering, what I've been asked is how, they just wanted to know how that we could limit certain groups and then have grocery stores full. And I've told them, grocery stores are essential.
Right.
People have to be able
That's
to eat,
Right.
get
Yeah, so
things they
Commissioner
need.
White, for instance, we could ask our sheriff's department or our fire marshal to do spot checks on certain businesses that are open and say, hey, this is the requirements or restrictions of how many people can be in this business at once, and there are some general guidelines. If they have those exemptions because they're a grocery store, they're still not supposed to have more than half of the maximum capacity in that store at any time. And I would argue probably they should self-police and probably consider that to be more limited. I know my daughter went to one of the other local stores, and they literally had a store employee at the door that was counting people they allowed into the building, and also had some degree of screening and testing outside the door, and then they had a limited number of people coming in. So again, what's the responsibility of that business? What's the personal's right, the individual's right? Say, you know what, if I think that store's too crowded, I'm not going to go to that store. So where do you find that versus enforcing with our county officials, our police, our law enforcement? That's the challenge.
What I've seen is most people are willing to take personal responsibility, but you're always going to have some that
Yes.
they don't take this serious.
Right.
Well, thank you for your
Yes, sir,
I
Commissioner.
got another question. I'm looking at an order here from John Hellerstadt from March 19th, 2020, and you've brought up something that I don't see in that. Has he issued a subsequent order to the March 19th?
No, the March 19th order is the only one that I'm aware of from Public Health Commissioner Hellerstadt.
Okay.
And I think what's important to recognize, and actually if you watch some of these press conferences, it's very interesting to see. In this case, this is a public health emergency that's a subset of any emergency in our community, right? Natural disaster. In this case, it happens to be infectious disease. But you've got Commissioner Hellerstadt, that's the specific advisor to the governor, just like I am to you. Okay, that's my role. That's my appointed role by this organization, is to advise you on these health and public health issues as relates to the community safety. Then on the other side of the governor, he had his emergency manager, okay, similar to Mr. Jay Webster. And again, we have a similar construct here where that emergency manager is responsible to help run the checklist and advise on any type of emergency, no matter the nature. So you've got that teamwork going on with Mr. Webster and myself. And then you have the elected officials. You have, in this case, it's the governor, who then takes Hellerstadt's order and says, how does this public health guideline apply to the specific individuals and liberties and freedoms and what's enforceable within the state of Texas, right? And that's exactly where you are here. Judge Massengill, yourselves as commissioners are in that same boat as Governor Abbott, as far as you're getting the information from your similar experts, and you're saying, how then does that apply to our community? What specific businesses should that impact? How do we follow the spirit and the letter of those public health guidelines? So Commissioner Eagle, that 19th, yeah, that guidance on the 19th is the last one I saw in writing from Hellerstadt.
All right,
but then we've seen at least three subsequent orders from the governor. So, and again, this body has the ability to do just that and tweak as we go, extend, release, change. I just want to make sure you have the best information I can provide from a health standpoint.
And Dr. Hellerstadt is, in his order of March 19th, is citing his authority by which he issues his orders under Chapter 81 Health and Safety Code, correct?
State of Texas Health and Safety Code, yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. And we have some guidelines for that down to the county level. That, again, with in coordination with you, coordination with county, our county attorney, we had the ability to look at those codes more specifically as far as how to relate to that or how to enforce that on either individuals or businesses or groups of individuals. And again, those are designed not just for this COVID-19. Those are general public health guidelines that are put inside in the Health and Safety Code to restrict movement of individuals, movement of cargo, restrict access to a particular building or home if there is considered to be a considerable threat to public health and safety. So it goes back to individuals' rights and protecting the public, and that's exactly what those codes are about.
Doctor, I got a question here. Some information for the public. I know you touched on it a little bit earlier, but explain one more time the procedure for testing so people get a sore throat, they just don't want to run up there and get a test. Kind of, since we're live streaming, kind of hit on that one more.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Deaver. I appreciate that. So in our community, we do not have a public health department or a public health testing facility. So we rely entirely on our local medical facilities. That's our hospitals, that's our nursing homes, that's our medical clinics. So what the folks here in town have been able to do so far, Lake Granbury Medical Center, again, is our local hospital, and they, by definition, have the most serious patients brought to them at the highest level of risk. So they have the capability to test either in the emergency department or on the inpatient side if folks appear to meet the criteria for COVID-19, which is you have to have symptoms, fever, respiratory illness, et cetera, and you have to have a known diagnosed contact with COVID-19 or travel to the specific areas that have been outlined by the CDC and Department of State Health Services to meet the initial criteria. Now, if someone's ill enough to require hospitalization, the hospitals are allowed to go ahead and test them anyway, even if they don't have a known contact because of the severity of their illness. The challenge is, even if we do test them, there's no change in the amount of medical care or the type of medical care we can provide. It's still supportive care in this case. I can't give them an anti-influenza drug like Tamiflu or something like that because those don't work against COVID-19. There's been some talk about some of the anti-malarial drugs. And the challenge even there is that we just don't know enough yet. There may or may not be one particular type of drug that might make a difference that's in limited supply because we don't normally use it because we don't face malaria across the United States regularly. And in the meantime, I did get a public health warning yesterday saying that people have been on their own going to like veterinary supplies and buying types of anti-malarial drugs, dosing themselves and killing themselves by trying to, again, follow hype and hysteria versus medical advice. So here in our community, we have testing capability at the hospital, For people that are extremely ill, require hospitalization, and even then, unless they're being transported by ambulance, they're being asked to call ahead and talk to their doctor first if they have any type of symptoms. And then their doctor can send them to one of the outpatient testing sites or recommend, again, I'm talking, if this is not a 911 emergency, you should call your doctor's office, because if your doctor's office doesn't have testing capability, well, there are a few sites here that are being administered through Lakeside Physicians, which takes care of about 80% of the medical care in our community. They have a couple of sites where if you call the doctor's office, say, I think I have these symptoms, I might have been exposed, they will arrange a test for you. And some of them are doing, they'll meet them at the side of the clinic, they're doing some drive-through testing, some of those kinds of things. So that is our capability right now in our community, is through our private partners who provide that medical care all the time.
Thank you, Doctor.
And again, just to follow up on what was shared earlier with Mr. Webster, if someone meets the criteria and they are tested, right now the quickest turnaround I've seen so far is 48 hours to get a test result. Some of the tests have taken a week or longer that were done earlier before we had, we were having to send tests to California, and they were just in the queue until, again, they got to them when they got to them. Now, across the United States, we've increased testing capabilities. We've improved our abilities to test here closer to home with the private labs here in Texas, and they've been able to do some 48-hour turnaround. Some of the other more advanced tests we talked about that are currently being developed, I don't expect to see them here in Hood County anytime soon, although they may end up being available in Dallas-Fort Worth just because it is such a large metropolitan area and there are other resources. Again, our access to those tests is still going to be limited on availability because their population comes first in Dallas County, Tarrant County, et cetera. So for now, we have to follow the CDC guidelines, which says if you are known to be a contact of a known COVID case, or you are a contact of a suspected case that's currently under evaluation and testing, the best guidelines we have right now are 14-day isolation. That's whether you're a family member, whether you're a coworker, whether you're a healthcare worker, et cetera. So, and again, that's the CDC guidelines to every community. Now, once we have a test result back, which, as I said, might be 48 hours, might be longer, then that individual case, that individual family and contacts can have some more public health guidance with those particular doctors. And so far, again, we've had 95 tested that I'm aware of in Hood County. We've had 6 positive results. We've had 47 negative results, and we have 42 that still remained open as of last night, earlier this morning. And so every one of those positive cases or those 42 pending cases, they all have to be treated as if they have COVID-19 until proven otherwise, which means that 14-day isolation for them and their close contacts, which I defined earlier, right? People that are regularly working close to them, sharing contact surfaces, either at home or at work, on a regular basis. And so that's the most current guidelines we have in our community or in any community until we get more data, we get more science, we have more testing capability, which will be some time for us.
So are we restricted now on the ability to test, or are we restricted because of the CDC guidelines to test? We've only done 95 out of 60,000 people in the county. That's not very many.
Okay, no, that's a great point, and I appreciate you bringing that up, Commissioner Cotton. So here's the thing. Here's the thing. Even in communities like in China or Italy or New York City, going through and testing everyone for this particular virus, it doesn't make sense for a couple of reasons. First of all, even if you had 60,000 test kits, if I don't have any respiratory symptoms, I'm not coughing, I'm not sneezing, I'm not running a fever, I don't have a runny nose, there's nothing to test. The way this virus or influenza or other similar viruses spread is through respiratory droplets, cough, sneeze, runny nose. And so I'm either sharing those droplets with the, again, 6 feet or so around me, depending on how powerful my sneeze is or my cough is, or so there's a surface here like this microphone, the other things that we're breathing on that someone has to touch and then touch their eyes or their nose or their mouth. That's the only way to spread any respiratory illness. So whether you're a healthcare worker caring for someone, again, that's where we get more cautious about masks and protection stuff, because I'm actually going to someone who's sick and trying to swab that nose or that throat, and they may cough on me at the time. So that obviously increases my risk as a doctor, right? Yeah. But in general, family members, contacts, someone who happens to be in Walmart or Lowe's or what have you, again, those are the risk factors. So if no one sneezed or coughed and we didn't touch the same things within a certain amount of time, there is no risk. And there's no reason to test the community as a whole because I don't have anything to test if you don't have any symptoms. So first of all, it's that symptom piece that I shared earlier, and then it's because of limited numbers of tests, and we're trying to triage, which means you use the available resources it's for the best effect. We're only testing the folks right now that meet those criteria, or they're sick enough to require, hospital evaluation, and that's exactly why. Let's put it this way, Commissioner Cotton. If I am Joe Citizen, and I happen to be going to the grocery store or Walmart like everybody else, may I have been exposed to someone that coughed 5 minutes before or something, and again, I picked up the same can of beans to use my previous example or whatever? Perhaps, but how strong is my immune system to begin with? Did I wash my hands or did I clean the surfaces, right? Did I touch that immediately after somebody sneezed on it, then rub my eyes and face and mouth, and that's really the only risk I would have if I'm not living or working close to someone who has symptoms and who has the virus. So about 80% of cases that do get exposed either will have no symptoms or very mild symptoms because just like anything else, just like any other virus, our body does have the ability to develop antibodies and protection. But if I'm older, if I'm already sick, if I'm already ill, if I already have respiratory issues, if I'm already run down with my immune system, I'm much, much, much more likely to have severe symptoms from that contact than someone else who is young and otherwise young and healthy.
Okay, so if you're, I think it's asymptomatic, what's the term?
Asymptomatic, yes, sir.
Asymptomatic, can you still contact somebody else? If you're asymptomatic, you don't sneeze, you're not coughing, can you expose somebody else?
So I think the jury's still out on that. I've done a lot of looking into that, and from what we know, again, we only know about the cases that have been tested so far, whether in China, Italy, New York, et cetera, and in the United States. So apparently there is some risk to someone who is recovering from the virus to spread or share that virus in a time frame where maybe they don't quite know, they haven't spiked a fever yet, but they're starting to have a runny nose or some of these symptoms. There is some risk of sharing the virus in those interim periods on either side of the illness. The illness itself lasts generally about 7 days where you know you're sick. So it's that day before and up to 3 days after when all viruses get spread through respiratory droplets, to things like that. Again, you think you're fine and you go back to work, and that little residual dry cough, you're still spreading virus. So that's the risk, is that little bit of time before and a little bit of time afterwards. And that's why they do the 14-day isolation, because, again, if I have a known family member that I know is sick with this virus, and I feel fine, I keep going to work and everything as usual, well, that interim period, that day or so where I still feel okay, I might start to shed the virus and share it with coworkers before I get sick. And so the next day I go into the hospital, now I get tested, now I'm isolated, but it's that interim period for those close contacts and family members that we're the most concerned about from an epidemiologic standpoint.
Good. Thank you.
That's the best answer I have for you. And again, Commissioners, I apologize. I tend to spend a lot of time trying to explain the reasoning behind my answers to you. I could do better with short, quick answers. But I think, as you mentioned earlier, Commissioner Eagle, we don't have anywhere else to be that's more important than what we're talking about right now. So I want you to have as much of the medical background and the reasons why versus say, well, it's 14 days or it's we need to isolate for X amount of time. Because that's the thought process or the medical science that's behind it. And we may get something new next week or later today from the CDC that says this is the new test, these are the new standards, but as of right now, the 14-day isolation is the best advice I have for you. And those are the reasons why. And the reasons why we test who we test and why it'd be a waste of the available test to just test everybody. We can test known contacts, okay, even if they're not sick yet. But again, is that going to change anything? I'm still going to isolate them. Yeah. I'm still not sending them back to work if I know they've been exposed to COVID. It's the folks I don't know about. It's the folks we don't know about. That's really the challenge for social distancing. Because if we knew everybody who'd been exposed and we could lock them down, keep them from traveling, keep them at home in Dallas-Fort Worth or anywhere, then we wouldn't have to do any social distancing. We wouldn't have to do any isolation, right? Because we would know these people are sick, keep them locked down, don't let them go anywhere.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate the explanations you're giving because, you could tell me an answer and I can relay that message to somebody else, but they're going to ask me why or how come.
Right.
And I appreciate you taking the time to explain a lot, go into more detail about what's going on.
Yes, sir. Happy to help. Do you have any other questions for me right now?
I'd like to say just one thing.
Hood County has been blessed by Dr. David Blocker. When he came to see me, I think in February of 2019, and gave me his plan and told me his credentials and him being in the service and what his background was in his medical deal, and asked me, can I be the public health officer? And we talked about it. I said, this sounds like a perfect plan, and his compensation is and has been zero. This man is up here doing all that he has done for all of us without any compensation. I'm going to try to set up something differently. Dr. Blocker and I have been talking about with the surrounding counties. Can you imagine we're one of 43 counties that are sharing a public health officer, and we're blessed with having this guy with all of his experience in medical and with the Army and knowing how to mobilize and administer everything. This is what I was telling Mr. Herbert here today, that I didn't place my executive orders. My first executive order was on March 19th after talking to Dr. Blocker and Jay Webster, and mine said 50 people in a place.
Right.
And we were talking about it, and Dr. Blocker said, well, the governor's going to probably come out with a more stringent deal, but I wanted to have people working, people staying together, and trying to make a living as long as I possibly could. So on March 19th, it was 50 people, and it didn't include, a lot of places didn't include gyms either. So I'm trying to do that on March 19th, and then that very afternoon, the governor comes out, and he says 10 people. And then he says, people shall avoid eating or drinking at bars, restaurants, food courts, or visiting gyms.
Right.
Now, if he orders you not to visit a gym, is that the same thing as ordering the gym owner to close? And what is the gym owner supposed to do if the governor said nobody can visit a gym? And the owner is at the gym, but somebody comes to his door. Based upon the governor's order, should that gym owner let that guy in? What do you think, Dr. Blocker? I know it's getting, I've already got you on the medical
Yeah,
side.
well, but
Now
Judge-
I got you on the Army side.
Yeah,
I want this to do, because Mr. Herbert here has a gym, and he was asking me about that. And man, I'm trying to keep business open. I don't want anybody to go broke. But like you said, if I have to err on the side of money versus a human life, because we have run out of ventilators or hospital beds or something, and that's the big problem, is that if we don't get a handle on it, the hospitals are going to be overwhelmed where we're not going to be able to treat these people, and people are going to die because of not being able to get the proper treatment. Am I correct?
Yeah, so Judge, again, that's a challenge for any community, right? Is how do you take the social distancing guidelines that we have, and again, it's not local here. I didn't make this stuff up. This comes from the CDC. This comes from historical data. This comes from what we've seen work for communities in the past, numerous times across the last 100 years, just in the United States. And so we know that social distancing ultimately limits the number of total cases and limits the amount of, or number of cases at any given time in any given community. So that's the real challenge for any government leader, any business owner, what have you, is where do they draw that line as far as personal responsibilities, responsibility for their business, responsibility for our community writ large, and then again, as Commissioner White was saying earlier, how do you control those folks that are always going to push the envelope anyway? And so trying to strike the right balance at the U.S. government level or at the state level or at the county level is going to be extremely difficult, because there's always going to be exceptions to the rule. There's always going to be that business or that owner or that individual that thinks they're the exception, and they might be. So we have to have enough communication and be open and upfront and honest about it, and just do our best to be consistent, understanding that we may get another governor, or actually the president's going to have another announcement tomorrow, as I understand has been released, and with additional issues that he's going to bring up across the U.S. It may or may not have a direct impact on what we're doing here in Hood County. I don't know yet, because I'm not privy to that. All I know is that's what came out over the news, I saw yesterday. So this is a moving target. I think we need to keep open dialogue, with one another and with our community. I think we need to use the best, make the best, common sense judgments that we can. And again, as a medical doctor, you already know, you said that, Judge, that I'm going to err on the side of protecting life, protecting individuals in our community, because I recognize that those public health decisions that happen outside of the medical clinic, outside the hospital, are going to have a much greater impact than how many doctors and nurses and medical tests we have available. That's really the bottom line. The decisions that you make have a greater impact on the lives of our community and the health of our community than anything I can do as a doctor. Okay? So I'm not trying to shove it off on you. I'm just saying that's how it is.
And I'll tell you this, you're working with Jay Webster. We're very fortunate. Hood County is blessed to have him also with his 30 years as being with the Texas Department of Public Safety. The two of you have worked well together, and we didn't have either one of y'all here when I took office. And to say that Hood County is blessed by having Dr. David Blocker and Jay Webster working together on the forefront of this and giving us this good information, because that's what I do. I always meet with the two of you and have our leaders. The Open Meetings Act doesn't let all of us get together, but right. I've had Commissioner Cotton meet with me, and we try to get together and come up with something that tries to protect all of our Hood County residents as best we can, by still trying to respect as best we can our individual rights. It's a hard balance. Right. But my stuff was more lenient than anybody else's around. I wanted 50. I got cut down to 10. I didn't have anything about gyms. The governor put his in the thing, but visiting gyms, Mr. Herbert, if you listen to the governor's order and it says no visiting gyms, and a guy comes up there to open the door, you gonna let him in? Anyway, we're going to get to that, let him get the story. But I'm going to say this. Thank you for all that you do. And come out, when we start making our budget this summer, I'm going to rectify it to the best of my ability to get you compensated, because I've never seen anybody work as hard and as tirelessly as you and Jay Webster have with the sheriff and keeping this under control. And I thank you, and on behalf of all Hood County residents, I thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Blocker.
Thank you, Judge. If I could just have two parting comments related to that. One is, I remain available as a resource to the entire community. Okay, so again, you and I and Jay talk the most often, because just to try to limit the number of texts and emails and things like that. However, again, every commissioner here, every one of our other appointed folks, again, the sheriff, when there's things that overlap, I'm readily available, and I'll continue to be so, whether or not we happen to make the same meetings or what have you. I want to provide the best input to the community. So, again, Commissioner Eagle, I think we took advantage of that over the weekend. We had a chance to talk a little bit and prep for this, and I appreciate the call. And I offer the same thing to every one of our leaders here, both in the county and in the city of Granbury. Chris Kaufman, appreciate you being here. Mayor Hewlett, others, that we've regularly been in coordination, because again, it's not just limited to the county officials, it's our different cities, our different municipalities. So that's the last piece I want to leave with this. I think it's fantastic that you want to compensate a doctor for his time. That's great. I appreciate that. Okay, and a doctor's time is valuable. I would tell you that my recommendation coming out of this, when you mention perhaps working as a smaller community within 2 or 3 of the counties around here to pool some resources, when we get to budgets, I would encourage that we look at the models that have been followed in some other rural areas of Texas and other states, where you pool some resources so you're not trying to entirely pay for those public health resources out of one county. We could leverage, but again, it takes time to coordinate that, and you can't wait till the budget meeting to do that. So as we walk through this crisis, I'll continue to provide some of those models that we've seen work successfully in other areas of Texas, where they pull a set of resources. And again, it's not just about the person in charge, right? I have a lot of great experience, but without a staff, without an office, without resources, without, so there's a lot of things that we still can't do. It doesn't matter how well studied I am or how much time I spend on this. So I'm a firm believer in everyone working to the highest level of their license. They're public health nurses. nurses, there's public health administrators that can do a lot of the tracking and follow-up and advising and public communication at a much lower price point than a doctor's time. There are public health technicians. There are individuals in our community that have trained at places like Tarleton and University of Texas Arlington and University of Texas Health Science Center in Fort Worth that I've been in regular contact with over the last couple of years because of my specialty, and that are looking for ways to serve their communities. And like I said, they don't have a master's or a doctorate, but they have training in epidemiology, case tracking, patient follow-ups, and whether it has to do with being able to administer the tests themselves or just supporting our hospitals and our clinics to follow up on these 95 cases. Right now, Lake Granbury Medical Center, they're taking care of the patients that are there. They don't have staff to contact and follow up with every one of these case trackings and their folks. If we had tests available to do as a community testing versus waiting for somebody to be sick and have to be in the hospital or the doctor's office, some communities have very successful models of doing that. And again, I'm not just talking about COVID-19, I'm talking about influenza season, I'm talking about other illnesses that we routinely see. So a very small cadre of staff could potentially have a great impact on Hood County and some of the surrounding counties for some of the tracking and communication and follow up on this versus waiting for the doctor to get to it, okay? So I'm gonna recommend some of those models and see what we could do with a relatively small but educated, trained, and ready to go team to support some of these things that include some of that routine surveillance and not waiting for the emergency, waiting for the outbreak. So all those things come at a cost, the manpower, personnel, locations, and all those things. So it really just goes back to coming out of this particular crisis. What makes sense to us and what do we want to do, what can we afford to do, and can we pool resources to do that? So I'll share some models and we'll have to make a decision of what makes the most sense. Because again, it's really not about me as a doctor, it's about having a public health as part of the infrastructure, just like our roads, just like our sanitation, just like our food. It overlaps all these areas to help keep people healthy when we're not in a crisis. Okay.
And we talked about that this weekend, Doctor,
Yes.
and I certainly understand and agree because, again, we come back around to we need more facts. And if you had some help to follow up on what is going on where we can start gathering more facts, that would be very helpful to you because right now you're kind of the Lone Ranger out there, right?
That's right. That's right. Again, our available folks for the city and the county are spending a lot of time on this, as they should in the midst of a crisis. Again, Jay Webster, the other staff. But it's taken away from the other duties they would routinely be doing. So even just having one or two people, maybe even temporarily in the midst of this crisis, brought on for a few hours a week, where it could make a huge difference as far as our awareness, our understanding, our tracking, because we can't wait to get the information back from the region. Region 2-3, by the time they get our reports that we know about, that we send them, and there's some legal requirements to, for instance, to let our emergency medical services and our volunteer fire departments and folks know if you have a positive case, then they're supposed to be able to be aware of that before they show up in the ambulance to that person's house to minimize risk to them and their ambulance and their team. Right now they have to treat everybody like that because we don't have a good tracking mechanism. So they're burning through more supplies, they're using more stuff than maybe they might need to do if we had a better tracking. But by the time we wait for our reports from our local hospitals and businesses to go up to the region and get that information back, it might be 72 hours turnaround. If you look at the day-by-day tracker that's updated on the Texas Department of State Health Service website, as of the start of this meeting, it still said there are 2 cases in Hood County. Well, I just told you there's 6. But there's that lag, right? Over the weekend, there's only so many resources at the state level, the regional level to follow up on that stuff, whereas we know now, but we don't have the resources to act and to protect ourselves in a more timely manner. So, Commissioner Eagle, that's what I was talking about. Again, even 1 or 2 people to help with some of this in the midst of the crisis, whether we repurpose some folks that are already on the books with the county or the city and train them up on some of this epidemiology tracking, or we bring some of these folks on board, like some of these recent student graduates that, hey, this is a real life lesson. They've already been trained in public health. They've already been trained in epidemiology. They already understand the basics of infectious disease, and giving them an opportunity to roll in, again, at a much lower price point than a doctor, to help us with this, a few hours a week, to help with that communication, tracking, and follow-up, so we have more infrastructure here. But I just can't do it myself. So I'll follow up. We're not going to get there today, but I have some examples. I have some examples. For instance, Dallas County is currently trying to hire 7 people to do just that, on top of their existing staff of hundreds. because of the amount of impact on them. So using some of those models and saying, hey, what are they doing in some of these bigger cities? If they need 7, could we get 1 or 2 with the same qualifications? And could we make it worth their time to work for us here if they already live in this area versus them having to go into the Metroplex to work? So that's what I'm talking about. Those are some of the things, practical, short-term things that we could be doing that would give us a huge return on investment. But again, it has a cost associated. Some of that could be done by telework and things like that. But again, I'm talking with Jay Webster in more details on that, so we can try to put something together that we're not there right this moment. But we can have something later in the week if you're interested.
Dr. Blocker, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay. Now, Mr. Herbert, you want to come up here and address us?
Morning, gentlemen. Thank you for your time. I'm not going to get too close to this.
Now, what you heard today didn't change your opinion anything, did
No.
it? Okay.
It did not.
I didn't think it would, but
Yeah.
go up here and let's hear your side of it, okay?
Tell me your name again, sir, I'm sorry.
Todd Hebert, but it's spelled Hebert.
Thank you.
Where's your business?
Lift the Bar Fitness on 377.
Okay.
This is my wife, Jennifer. We own Lift the Bar Fitness. I threw this together real quick because he called me this morning and said, come on down. So to make it clear, we're not here specifically because we own a business in Granbury that your mandate closed down because of financial reasons, okay? So know that I'm not here because we're suffering financially because you closed my business down, okay? I have another job. I make decent money. We're here on behalf of every business that was mandated to close, as well as our Lift the Bar family, for our Lift the Bar family that depends on their workout time for relief, to stay healthy, to exercise their demons, and for their overall happiness. Your mandate has deprived them of these rights as Americans. No common sense was used in the creation of this mandate. President Trump stated yesterday he's worried about depression, suicide rates climbing, and the rates of drug use escalating. So are we. When you did this, when the Governor Abbott did this, we worried about that. Because we know what it's like to own a gym. We know our gym members, they're our family. A lot of these people have to come to the gym to basically live normal lives. And you just deprived them of that. We would never forgive ourselves if we didn't do everything for our Lift the Bar family members, and one or more of them takes their life because the one place that they go to let go is closed, and that's why we're here today. That's our concern. One of our biggest factors in combating the COVID-19 is being healthy, and yet your mandate closed the places that people go to get healthy and to stay healthy. Does that make any common sense? Furthermore, the fact that 5 people, you, can strip away America's constitutional rights and liberties at a moment's notice with an unspecified timeline does not and will not sit well with most Americans. Until this COVID-19 outbreak, I don't think many Texans knew you had this power. And I foresee there will be lots of money spent on lawsuits, making sure it never happens again. Just for clarification, Governor Abbott did not close my gym. He forbade people to go there. Whether or not they wanted to take that chance and get arrested or whatever, that was up to them. He was a smart man. He also knows the gym industry is a huge industry in the state of Texas and would sue him. And that they can't now because he never closed them. He said, you can't go to the gym. He didn't say you have to close your doors. Also, President Trump himself has not infringed on any American rights. He's touting the CDC recommendations, not mandates. And if anyone should have the authority, it's him. They are federal rights. Governor Cuomo didn't like it when President Trump threatened his rights. He fought back. He's all up in arms because Trump threatened his rights. But he didn't seem worried when he tread on the rights of New Yorkers. In closing, I implore you to reconsider your essential business mandate, as all businesses are essential to the health of the citizens of Hood County. This is not about an economic disaster. This is about the mental health of thousands of people who lost their jobs and are not sure how they will feed their families, buy medicine, they lost insurance, and they're not sure how they're going to pay their mortgage or their rent. When it comes to the gym, common sense would apply. We are a 9,000 square foot facility. I'm certain we can keep social distancing, 6-foot recommendation, if we allow only 10 people in at our place at a time. We'd like to thank you for your allowing us to speak on this matter. We could go into Lowe's and Home Depot and the vast amounts of elderly people purchasing non-essential items and how we are sacrificing for their sake, but they are ignoring your mandate as well if you'd like, but that's up to you. I have pictures of it.
I told you this morning when we talked, I didn't get your letter until last night,
Right.
and then I called you this morning.
Yes, sir.
So, anyway,
I'm glad you did.
my wife goes to the gym and has been 5 times a week. She wakes me up at 4 o'clock every morning. She has weights and stuff at home and exercise mats and everything. That doesn't keep her from working out. She works out with weights and she does her exercises, and most of the people that go to your gym, and I've been to your gym, I've seen them. They're almost like professionals like you and your wife are, where you're bodybuilders. Probably 90% of the people that come to your gym, Mr. Herber, do have their own weights and stuff
They
at their
do
own
not.
house.
I cannot tell you how many of my members have called me to ask me to take weights, bars, equipment home for this duration.
Have you allowed that?
Yes.
Okay. So the ones that really want to work out, if they could do that. I know that Home Depot doesn't sell weights and stuff, I don't think.
Correct.
And I'm not in favor of Home Depot selling stuff that people don't need. But Jay, didn't you tell me that Home Depot and Lowe's are considered disaster partners and have to stay open? Is that correct? Yes. See,
Well, I'm not asking you, I'm not saying,
no,
That's
but
not
see,
my
you're
fault.
using that as an example that you got people going in there and buying plants, and you're watching that, and it's upsetting to you. It's probably upsetting to me too if I see it. I don't
Sure.
go to those places, don't have to, and I avoid them. I'm going to stay away from that. I wouldn't like that either, but we can't do anything about Lowe's and Home Depot. We can't do anything about grocery stores and pharmacies. But with the gym, you can, if you got the weights, let people use them and they can work out at home.
But there's
you're
a point
saying-
where
Let
I'm
me finish,
gonna-
I'll listen to you,
Okay.
now you gotta listen to me. You could walk, you could exercise and get the endorphins rolling in your mind and do the weights and do some workout. That's what my wife does, and I'm sure glad she does it. It makes it a little easier to live with her. Right, Katie? But, so, that's my spiel on it. Nobody's trying to infringe your purpose. Let me tell you something, but if you think that the governor, and what he said, if you'd listen to him, he says that these commissioners court, he wants everybody to do it on a local level. That's why he said, I'm not going to issue a statewide order, because what does Dallas and Houston and San Antonio and Austin need versus some West Texas county is entirely different. He's never going to issue a statewide order. And we did it, and we agonized over that. And Chris Kaufman and the mayor had to drag me along forcefully to get me to sit down, and after a lot of consultation with Jay Webster and Dr. David Blocker, did I finally capitulate really to saying it's in the best interest of all of Hood County so the residents would not get mixed signals from us with the city coming out with something. By the way, your gym is in the city limits.
know.
And
I
so
started with you.
you would have been shut down by the city, okay? But I didn't want to shut you down. I didn't want to shut down anybody. And it just happens when you have scientific data and medical evidence that says if we don't do something, it's going to be a catastrophe. I hope I'm wrong. We're going to find out in Collin County whether Chris Hill, by nation order, he's either right or wrong. If he's wrong, and it spreads like wildfire, and Collin County has 996,000 people, roughly a million, probably over a million, and 1,100 hospital beds. If it hits and sparks in Collin County, and Plano, which is in Collin County, touches really 3 counties. Part of it is in Dallas County, Denton County, Collin County. The people in Dallas are drastically concerned about that because you're going to have an overcrowded of hospitals, and that's what everybody is trying to prevent. if the worst that had happened, read what Dr. Burks said this morning on her deal and how many people she expects are going to get sick and what it's going to do to our health system. So that's why we made, or I made, the difficult decision that I made. And then that's why the 5 of us are here this morning. I wanted to be transparent to the Hood County residents that what I did, I had to do and felt I had to do was in the best interest of all of Hood County residents. And it was after a lot of anguish with Jay, Dr. Blocker, Mayor Hewitt, and Chris Kaufman, and with Ron Cotton here, that we decided, given all the factors, that was the best decision to make. So if you want to respond to that, please.
My response is, you are correct in your assumptions of the data. What I'm saying is, the long-term effects, he can't even give you the data for yesterday on the issue at hand, which is COVID-19. The data of what are you going to do and how many deaths is it going to take in any county, right? From these mandate orders, from depression, from suicide, how long is that going to take, and when does that balance out? Where we've killed more people by suicide and depression, or high crime rates from people, having to go and steal to provide for their families, and people getting killed doing that. When is that balance? When do we go, okay, that's enough of that? I mean, we've now eclipsed the COVID-19 death rate by instilling these mandates. That's what I wanted you to think about. That's what I'm concerned about. And I'm concerned about it for my people, for my gym members, my family members, people we know. Because we know how much that's a release for those people. And I'm not, like I said, it's not just that, right? I mean, I could be in here talking about restaurants and bars, because that's a release as well. I mean, we all know going out and drinking is another release. So you basically, the governor has taken away everybody's release, basically, to do anything. So now they just stuck in their home. A lot of people have depression issues already. Now they don't have a job. That's what I wanted you to think about. That's my concern.
Well, thank you very much for coming down here. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay. Does anybody else have anything that they would like to say to us, Sheriff?
Well, he's come up here, Judge, just for transparency. I think every county that's connected with Hood County, I think, have done a shelter in place, haven't they?
Yeah.
So it would be, we would just have to do it. We can't be the only county not doing it, and every county around us is. They'll all be coming to our county. So I thought I'd just make that comment.
Sheriff Deeds.
Judge, Commissioners, I've been the sheriff, excuse me, I've been the sheriff now for going on 12 years, and we've had a number of disasters in that time. And even going back 20, 30 years that I've been in emergency services, we've had tornadoes, we've had floods, we've had fires, and it's right out there in front of you, and it's easy to deal with. This is something, in 2013, May 15th of 2013, we had the tornado that killed the 6 people, but my people went, took care of it, we dealt with it, because it was right out there, you could see it, you knew what you had to do and get after it and get her done. This is something that's unlike anything we've ever had before in the country. So the other day I heard this rumor that found out it wasn't true, but that FEMA was going to offer $6 an hour extra per people that came to work, not just deputies, but any county employee. So I checked because it came out of Tarrant County, and it came from straight from the Tarrant County Sheriff, Bill Wayborn, that he said, no, that wasn't true, that's not FEMA. But the Hood County, or the Tarrant County Commissioners Court had met because of the discussion of we need people to work. I'm an essential person, essential office that we have to be there. No matter what, we got to continue to serve the citizens of this county. And I believe that most, or not most, I'll say all of the services that the county provides is pretty essential, and we need to be there from the county clerk, district clerk, everybody in between. So I think if they would come to work, that'd be a great thing. We've got, in my office now, as of Friday night, we had one patrol deputy that was tested. We're waiting for that outcome to whether he's positive or negative. We had to send him home to quarantine. We have another guy that was riding with him that we had to send him home to quarantine, so him and his family. Then this morning it was brought to my attention that we have another deputy that's got to be tested and quarantined at this point. So until we know if they're positive or not, they're at home for those days. I've got a set number of deputies, total, counting my investigators, I've got 52 investigators, but dispatchers are in there. I don't want any of them to get sick. Jailers, we have to take care of those inmates, so I don't want to lose anybody. But there's a lot of scared people out there of the unknown of what's going to happen, what's going on right now. I think the media makes it worse than what it is sometimes, but the facts are out there. The facts are building every day as far as what Dr. Blocker talked about as far as the statistics that we got and the numbers that are going up every day. So I'm down 3 people in my office, and 2 of them are in patrol. And most of the time it seems like with vacation times and sick time for just everything else that we're lucky if we're running 4 to 5 people on a shift. I need to make sure that those guys and gals aren't just sitting there thinking in the morning, should I really go to work? I implemented a deal this morning that I want the guys, if they're going to be in close contact with people, to wear a mask and wear your gloves. And that came from Fort Worth. They implemented that the other day, and they had 2 officers that are positive, tested positive, so they're done. They're quarantined until further notice. So I told my guys we're going to have to do that too. I want to protect them as best we can. But back to the deal what Tarrant County's Commissioners Court did, that they implemented a $6 per hour fee for the duration of this disaster to help give an incentive for people to come to work. Kind of like hazard pay, with them in regard to my deputies, people that are dealing one-on-one with people. So it would come to my attention. I want to bring it to your attention. They were able to go for $6 an hour. I'm not going to ask for that, but I'd ask that you keep an open mind and think about that. There's a lot of, my guys see a lot of people in the county that went home because they shut their doors and said, yeah, call a phone number and you can get in and we'll help you out. Well, my guys, we don't have that luxury of doing that. They call, we got to go. They come to see us, we got to take care of them. So we're business as usual and then some because of everything that we got going on. So people are calling concerned, but we still got to keep on working, so.
Is Tarrant County doing it for every person in the sheriff's department, or is it only for jailers and patrol people that are in contact and exposed to the?
I heard all county employees. That's to help them get everybody to come to work if they're able to and have an incentive to come. So it's not just deputies, not just jailers, it's everybody in the county. I don't know the county judge up there like you probably do, but that came from Sheriff Wayborn. So,
okay. So that would include Chad?
That would include the constables too. They're all coming to work. Yeah, we got 3 constables in the office today, or in the courtroom today. So yeah. Anybody that can come, then I think it would help. So, but to keep you updated, so I've got 3 people out of work directly related to this possibility of having contracted the virus.
Is there any possibility of hiring any kind of replacement for the 3s that gone out? Is there anybody out looking for work, or?
We have a hard time getting applications as it is. So I don't think we have any applications on hold at this point in time. And I have an opening in investigations. I don't think I have any in patrol. Actually, we got 2 of the patrol guys are in the Tarrant County Academy right now. And that was on again, off again, and it's back on again for this week, but they're doing work online work. So we're hopefully, it's going to take a little longer to get them through, but that's still a work in progress.
I'm a little confused. Help me out. You're talking about county employees that are getting paid already and another $6 an hour if they come into the office.
That's what they're doing. And if they work from home, they don't get it. If they, in Tarrant County, if they come to work every day, they're getting that extra $6 an hour.
we've actually got a
That's gonna
policy. We're
go
trying to
real
keep people,
good.
keeping people at home. We're trying to encourage people. We ought to pay them more money to stay home.
Stay at home and work from home.
Yeah.
I mean, if we paid people to come to work, we're just going to crowd up the offices and stuff that if they're not essential. I know you're in a tough position. You're essential and all of your deputies are essential, and you can't do what some of the offices in the county can do and keep people at home, work from home. Skeleton crews, rotate skeleton crews such as road operations, where they can do that. I totally understand where you're coming from, but boy, for the rest of the county, I'd have to think about that one.
Yeah, well, and
far as
you can do, it's your decision anyway. I'm
Yeah.
just pointing out some stuff. As far as skeleton crews, I figure I'm at a skeleton crew as it is.
Yeah.
I'm at minimum jail standards for jailers in the jail. Deputies, if I get 4 out there on the street, I'm doing pretty good, and I figure I have to have at least minimum 4. Today, we had to call in some extra because of people not being there, because I figure if I had domestic disturbances, I can't send one person, I got to send 2 for officer safety. So 2 pairs is the minimum I can deal with.
Let me ask you this. How many total people are in the sheriff's department that this would be effective? We decide something. How many people? For everybody in the police office? The secretaries?
144, 145, I believe is what I have. That's everybody that works for me.
And it would be better for your particular department if everybody came to work rather than you saying you're working like some of the offices can. Your office, to function properly, needs everybody, dispatchers, secretaries, everybody coming in.
Yeah, and clerks too, because they're very important with, they're still writing some tickets, they're still entering warrants, processing the warrants, doing the paperwork. So I need all processing reports, so I need everybody I can get. I don't have a skeleton, we're at skeleton crew, I can't send anybody home. If I sent people home, we'd have half the work getting done, and I'd have citizens that aren't getting taken care of, so.
The problem I have with it is, we've shut, this order has shut down a lot of restaurants and a lot of people that are getting zero pay. But we're going to take the tax money and give the county employees a big raise for a while. I don't think that's too.
I'm just asking.
It's not going to go over well, I promise you that.
I'm just asking, so it was done up in Tarrant County, so I'm just asking.
Let me ask you another thing. Roger, the numbers in the jail are down. How can we have a skeleton crew with jailers and
I've got some sick ones in there too. I think I have still an opening. We still have to keep everybody separated as far as minimum, maximum security, sex offenders from everybody else. So we've got them scattered out in the jail, like Commissioner Cotton brought up to me one day about, is there any way we can add to the jail as far as the existing jail and keep other females in there? That was tried a number of years ago when Sheriff Hardin was in there, and it didn't work out because you have to keep the females separated by sight and sound.
Right.
And that didn't work out too good. It didn't work out at all. That's why they stopped doing it. The jail just was built to hold 20 females, and the others are 172 males. That's counting the segregated cells. So we still have them spread out. We can't really consolidate any more than we have.
So if you had less males in there, you couldn't take a wing or a pod and, add to the women's, as long as they were out of sight?
Well, we kicked around a couple different ideas, like if we, on the right-hand side of the main run, we got 24 man pods down there. If we took the one on the far end and built a wall somehow and made a hallway outside, because there's a doorway out into the yard, and brought them back around into the female side, that's maybe possible, but there's no way we could parade them up and down in front of the males, and we'd have more problems. And that's kind of what happened back when they did that in years past. So just, we thought about it a lot of different ways, and they tried housing them in the E and F tank up close on the left-hand side there by the front of that run, and it still didn't work out. So,
I do know you have a difficult job, and you try to do the best you can with what you have, and I appreciate that.
and we need to keep extra space there anyway. The Jail Commission says we can't have 192 inmates in a 192-bed jail. We have to keep a little cushion in there, and now, fortunately, I don't have anybody sick, but what if I do? Then I got to be able to separate them out. I think Tarrant County has some people that tested positive, but Dallas definitely did. And they've got, I think, 6,000 people in their jail, so they got different wings, different areas they can separate people out, and I guess that's what they're doing. But I don't want, we'd have a big old problem if we had that happen up here. So I want to point that out, what my status is as far as my deputies that are down and out for 14 days until I get them test results or get them tested, period. So I hope I don't lose any more. So, thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you, Sheriff. Jake, you got something to say?
Yeah, Commissioner Eagle didn't want to know, one thing is y'all want me to cover any more stats concerning the Collin County, us and all that, with the email that was sent out? Because Collin County is one of the counties that does have relaxed. They also have 128 positive cases and 1 death. I know that they have 900,000 more people, but they're still, if you start looking at their numbers, they're in that 1.5% to 2% of going to be up here by the time it's said and done because they are relaxed. So just kind of take into that consideration as well. We can get more in depth if you want. I'll let him come up because it talks about that 40%, that if you don't do anything, what you're going to look like versus what we are doing. He's better at depth at speaking to that. The only other thing I wanted to add was I'm in contact with Becky Kidd, Leanne, and Melissa. Becky's getting us set up, helping me get set up with the FEMA tracking of cost. So anything that we're doing concerning COVID, y'all are going to be getting an email because I'm going to need y'all's help as well, because like today, Commissioners Court, your time needs to be tracked. Every time we've had a discussion, the 4-hour meeting and all of that needs to be tracked. Anything that the sheriff does that is outside of the norm because of what we're having to do to combat or keep staffing or anything like that is also trackable. So just keep that in mind with decisions as we go forward. I know it's not going to be a check tomorrow, but somewhere down the road there is going to be costs coming back to us for everything that we've done. Just like for me, starting February the 16th, going forward, all of this month, my whole salary is going to be 75% of my salary from this point forward is covered under FEMA recoverable because that's all I'm doing every day. So anything that Doc Blocker does, all of his hours will come back. We'll get reimbursed for that and so forth. So I just want to keep that in mind. But I will need some help. She's going to be sending out stuff to all the department heads. We just need to keep reminding them they need to get onto that and start documenting so that when we get to that point.
What about some of these graduate students that we were talking about at the University of North Texas and some other things that Dr. Blocker said? Is there any way that they would come up here if we could pay them something? Have y'all said that? I mean, we would maybe have to get with the auditor to see what funds or what we can have, because I think you do need some help. You've got a lot of reports. I know you're drowning. I know Dr. Blocker is, and y'all could use some help.
So let us, if you don't mind, let us kind of put that together in writing to kind of ask those people those questions. He's got some information of people. Let's see what their answer is. Come back with what that would look like to cost us. And then we'll give you, either meet with you or give a presentation to the Commissioners Court to answer that question. But you're right. If it wasn't for some of the other staff that's coming from the other departments to help me answer the phone, I would be juggling 3 cell phones every day. Trish back here in the back could attest to that. She watched me do it the other day. Every time we have a meeting, I can tell you what's going to happen this afternoon and in the morning. They're all going to call wanting to know why, ifs, and dealing with the Walmart calls and the Lowe's calls and trying to answer those questions as best I can.
I know Kathy Jividen down there, she came and helped my office out one day, and it was really a godsend.
Yeah,
and
you stole it from me.
Then she came up and worked for you, which was probably better, and then Yolanda Hernandez in your office did the translation of the executive orders that was probably a tremendous help. So I really appreciate your going way above and beyond. Thank you, Kathy.
So one more fact that I would like to give you, Commissioner Eagle, is what I am personally, with some help, having to deal with, is our nursing homes are not going to get any supplies. So if they're a nursing home or assisted living, they've already been told they will not get anything out of the Strategic National Stockpile. So about 10 to 20% of my day, every day, is looking for some way to grab supplies for those nursing and assisted living homes, so that we somehow together, along with the city and some other community people, are dragging stuff together to be able to deliver those supplies to them because of what's going on the health side, and it's affecting everything that's happening with that high-risk community that we're trying to take care of from the Hood County and the city. So that's kind of some more stuff for you to think about, is the overall effect of what we're having to deal with to help those out.
And we can discuss things, you know, as like grown men, and maybe possibly disagree once in a while and be okay with that.
I'm good.
And I appreciate that what you brought us about Collin County just now, and you attribute it to their order, and I don't see how you can make that leap, because I quoted earlier today about the Travis County numbers. They're on total sequester until May the 3rd, by the way. They've done theirs, the city council has done, well, not Travis County, but the city of Austin, they've shut everything down till May the 3rd, except essential services. And they've got 170 cases and 1 death. So I'm not sure I can agree that there's a factual basis to correlate whatever order that Collin County's got in that 1 death they got. I mean, I'm not arguing.
No, I agree.
I'm just pointing that out.
So part of that conversation has been, and hence why Betsy Price called the mayor here, telling him, thank you for doing what we did. Because the fear of having the open lines with Denton, so some of that community transmission has been caused by people traveling back and forth and not having to abide by certain things going over here or going over there, has helped contribute to what you see going on up there. We think we've jumped on it pretty good, but time will tell us in the next 2 or 3 weeks, unfortunately. So that's just kind of my point, is we jumped on it, our numbers are low, some didn't jump on it, and it still seems to be spreading because everybody's still traveling back and forth. Granted, we can have a conversation all day about the Lowe's and the Home Depot's doing the same thing, and I get that. I just wanted to kind of show you that there are some big factors, and they get way above my capability on numbers that I want to get into right now, but that's why I pointed that out.
And I appreciate that, and I realize that you're working very hard trying to, stay on top of this. Thank you.
You're not hurting my one feeler, I promise.
Jay, I got one more question. Just for clarity, what did Collin County do specifically to loosen what did they do?
So they were still going to allow restaurants to be open.
And they're doing that now?
Well, the mayor, so we'll find out this afternoon, and somebody, if I misread it, you help me out. But based on what I understand is the city did one, just like we've done. The county did a more relaxed. And so the mayor says, no, you're going to be closed. And so one of the business owners is suing the mayor for
Closing restaurants?
You made me close my restaurant, but the county judge said I don't have to, so therefore I don't have to. So there is a hearing this afternoon to determine.
Okay.
And if I could add, I spoke with a county commissioner in Erath County this morning, and they have an in-place order until April the 1st, but they didn't shut down they didn't force any business at all to shut down. They basically left it up to the individuals, and so far, according to him, they've got 3 cases.
Right.
One, a Tarleton professor who actually went to New York City, and so, and he's
Right.
and so you've already spoken to the people in Erath County, so you know this.
Yes, sir.
But that's an example of a county that has not done an order like we've got right now, so.
Well, how many restaurants are actually open? Are restaurants closing, or are there restaurants?
I don't have an answer to that.
I could get that for you and email you. I know that having conversations with their county emergency management coordinator, that the city council and the county commissioners were both split
Kind of like Plano.
on how to do it. How did they, so what you saw come out in order was kind of that middle ground compromise, yeah.
If I could approach with some follow-up based on
Yes,
the
sure,
conversations?
please.
Okay. So I want to make sure, based on some of the comments, both of the citizens and folks here, I just want to make sure that everybody recognizes, and it's hard to do. I mean, these are emergency measures. These are emergency times. Our president, our governor, our community leaders, approach any of these issues very carefully, right? And they should, because again, these all have to do with restricting the freedoms that folks are used to having as Americans, as Texans, and I kind of alluded to this briefly previously, but the fact is, these are emergency orders. These are emergency declarations, and it's not just here in Hood County. It's not just the state of Texas. I mean, it's across the U.S. and it's worldwide. And again, we can talk about, testing and tests available and how quickly tests are available and whether or not everybody was tested or not. I mean, if you look at the global numbers over the weekend, the United States actually had more tests and more positive cases reported than even China does now. And that's largely associated with our large metropolitan areas such as New York City, okay, over in the Bay Area of California. That also includes Dallas, Fort Worth, and Houston. And as I said in my opening comments, I think anything that we do here, we have to frame in context that we are one small, bedroom community that's associated or an outset of Dallas-Fort Worth. And so we really should look carefully at what they're doing and why they're doing it and the timing it's done when it comes to how we do it here in Hood County. And again, because the numbers are much smaller, but percentage-wise over time, we can expect to see some similar results and similar outcomes long-term, depending on the timing in which we take these certain actions. So again, we don't take them lightly. I give you my best advice. I'll tell you the other thing is that people that are first responders, our law enforcement, our medical personnel, our EMS folks, those folks don't have a choice to stay home and work from home, okay? So we can run these kinds of meetings by teleconference and still get work done. We can do, admin work and things like that, again, at a distance, even if we're all linked into laptops or on the phone conference or what have you, and I've done those kinds of things in the military, right? Overseas and satellite connections that we're getting work done about, guidance from Tampa to what we're doing in the Middle East, right? So I've seen that done very effectively. But at the end of the day, you still have to have boots on the ground to get to accomplish the mission. We have to have law enforcement officers that are able to, that are well enough protected and resourced well enough to get the job done, regardless of what the crisis is going on outside. We've got to have healthcare workers that are able to get to work and provide that care because they're going to the front lines of this particular battle, right? And the same with our EMS folks responding around the community and having timely information. So I just want to make sure we understand, because some of this comments sounded like in context of we're talking about doing for people that are in the front lines, law enforcement, EMS, and a lot of those here are volunteers, right? All volunteer fire departments and things like that. But they're able to do what they need to do because ultimately that does help to minimize the risk to health and safety of our community. So again, I would encourage you not to paint everyone that happens to be an employee with a broad brush, because some folks don't get their jobs done unless they're on those front lines, right? Medically or law enforcement, what have you. As far as nursing homes go, some of the news over the weekend talked about nursing homes, particularly in Dallas County and some in Tarrant County, that are starting to have these outbreaks. And nursing homes have totally locked down. I mean, they don't let their people leave for medical appointments, because if they leave, they're not allowing them to come back because of the risk to the other folks. And it goes back to the health risks already associated with those folks. And so unless we have doctors visiting those nursing homes or home health or hospice folks that can prove that they're not sick and go in and provide those care, they're really stuck with what they got, the staff and the personnel and, medical or not, to take care of the nursing home folks, because there are some significant outbreaks in nursing homes. And CDC guidelines on that, again, there's a lot more risk there. So those populations could be decimated fairly quickly. And we have a disproportionate number of people who are in that setting, because that's our community, right? 25% of our community is elderly, and a larger proportion when you look at folks at risk. So with other comorbidities, whether or not they happen to be 65 or older, those are the things that we see the disease hurt the most. So Jay asked me to share some of this that we talked about in our EOC meeting earlier in the week. Ricky Reeves, who is our Texas EMS director, and I don't think they're represented here at the moment, but he also, he not only helps to train all of our emergency responders in Hood County, including our volunteer fire department folks, but he has the distinction of coming to us after serving in Louisville for years in the Metroplex. And so he kind of knows what good looks like on the large scale as far as EMS and emergency management, those kinds of things. And he continues to be the director of the North Texas Trauma Regional Advisory Council. And so, for instance, when we go to the conferences at the Texas state level, these are the folks that are advising, advising all of the counties and all the folks in the region, and help tie into, again, emergency resources, EMS resources, trauma care, what hospitals can do trauma care and things like that, even when we're not in a crisis. So Ricky Reeves is very, very well poised and very experienced in this. Based on his experience and based on what he was getting, again, North Texas Regional Advisory Council and that kind of thing, he put some numbers on the back of the napkin about what kind of numbers we can expect based on our populations, based on the age risks and numbers of hospitalizations like. So I intentionally didn't share this earlier because I was speaking more in generalities, but when we put this in context, if we assume a 40% infection rate, this is minimizing the amount of social distancing, minimizing the amount of things that we put on our community. We assume that 40% of people are going to end up with the disease over the next 2 or 3 months. What do those numbers look like for Hood County? When you adjust them for age, just for age, not those comorbid factors. I'm just talking about when you look at the number of elderly people that are 65 and older and their likelihood of having hospitalization or dying from COVID-19, based on what we know, this last week. We could expect about 2,200 people total to be infected in our community, but 22,000. That's a huge difference. 22,000, or 40% of the population. 22,000, and like we said before, hey, 80% might have mild symptoms. They may or may not need a doctor's care, but overall, 22,000 people with COVID-19 over the next 2-3 months. Okay, out of that, when you adjust for age and risk factors. The number of those 40% infected is, we look at about 560 deaths in our community. So, and the hospitalization rate being what it is, again, best projection we have, about 1,600 of those 22,000 might need hospitalization. 7-8% of those people infected might need hospitalization. Again, hey, the rest are great. But those 7 or 8% are the ones we're concerned about when it comes to resources available and how quickly and how often and how many at once need a hospital, right? When we've got 37 regular hospital beds and 12 ICU beds and again, less than 10 ventilators altogether available. So how much demand is, those 1,600 people put on those hospital resources here, assuming that we don't have somewhere else to send them. And then 561 deaths estimated. If we have a 40% spread in our community. Now, with social distancing, again, this is all back of the napkin stuff, so we can question this all, but this is purely just conjecture, hypothetical. Let's say we limited it, we lock it down. We keep the cases that we know about limited to those close deals. We continue social distancing for some time, if needed, right? If indicated. Now, I already told you the stats tell us that might be 8 weeks, okay? Then we expect we could potentially have it as low as 2% prevalence, or 1,100 total cases with infection in the county. Out of those, 80 or so requiring hospitalization over the next 2 or 3 months, and 28 deaths. So those are the numbers, and again, you can adjust the percentage rates up and down as much as you want, but somewhere on the scale, if we have to choose between taking actions to limit, 2,200 cases to 1,100 cases, 22,000 cases to 1,100 cases, that's that's an exponential difference, really, there. 81 deaths, 28 deaths versus 560, 81 hospitalized versus 1,600 hospitalized. I mean, that math, no matter, you know, where you put it on the scale, is pretty simple. So again, I intentionally didn't publish that because those are numbers on a scale, but it does give some context. We look at our population, it looks like, we look at the risk factors, and you know, I would prefer to keep us on that lower end. I'd prefer to, that's what the flattening the curve, that's the whole flattening the curve conversation brought to Hood County. If we can limit the exposures, we know that it limits the overall number of cases. We know it limits the number of people who need a hospital at once, and eventually on the other end, how many deaths we're likely to see. Any questions on that?
So you're thinking our orders are what is the best thing that we can do to protect the residents of Hood County?
Yeah. Yeah, you can't pick and choose from a menu and say, well, I want to you know, leave this open because I like going here, but I'm going to close this one now because I don't like that. I mean, if we right now have limited to those critical infrastructure pieces, right? We said, you know, hey, grocery stores, ability to put gas in a vehicle because folks still need to be able to get to and from work if they have to go to work or if they have to travel. And, you know, and minimum things for construction and repairs and things like, because again, if everybody's at home, they got to have a safe home to be in, right? So they can't have leaking water or electricity out or problems with sewer or plumbing or what have you. So there's some core infrastructure pieces as individuals, as households, as well as a community that we have to keep in place. Again, EMS, medical care, things like that. Beyond that, the best advice from a medical standpoint and a public health standpoint is to continue to restrict movement, continue to do the social distancing, bring more resources if we can to track the cases we do know about or the contacts we do know about here in Hood County. And that's what we were talking about earlier. If we can, you know, bring some more help on board. So it's not just the doctor, just the expert looking at this, but I can train, you know, a couple of folks to help me track down these 95 cases and their contacts. That helps us to limit that. And again, that's what they're doing in the larger cities. That's what they are doing in Tarrant County, Dallas County, Denton County, where they have the health departments. They're taking those public health trained people and they're putting them towards tracking these cases. I can't do that right now. So I think we could have some more benefit from that and cut down on some of the unknown and cut down on some of that, hey, if we know this family has had a follow-on versus they just happen to have a doctor visit or ER visit and they're waiting for you know, 5 or 6 days and they're doing whatever they think they should do in the meantime, if we actually have some more teeth to that, then that definitely could help limit spread and limit impact on our community for the things that people have to do. That's the best advice I have.
Let me say one thing. Commissioner Eagle, did you say that the restaurants in Erath County were open?
No, that's what I wanted to address.
No, I had my office talk to Judge Campo himself. Only curb service and delivery service. There's no in dining in Erath County.
It was funny, they just sent me their updated one when I sat down
Okay.
back there. That's what I wanted to bring up there and
Good.
share with
Bring
all
us
y'all.
what else?
So it says restaurants with or without drive-in or drive-through services or microbreweries, microdistilleries, or wineries may only provide takeout, delivery, or drive-through services as allowed by law. They also, in that order as well, prohibited you from buying toilet paper no more than 12.
Yeah.
Can I say one more thing if we're talking about our local counties? You mentioned this earlier, Judge. Again, I said Public Health Region 2-3 covers 49 counties in this part of Texas, which includes all the Metroplex and all the way out to north to Wichita Falls and out to the west as far as Midland, I believe. So out of those 49 counties, there are a number of the large cities that have health departments. There are only a handful of counties that have a doc appointed. We have one, Somervell County has one for Glen Rose, we're in regular communication. Cleburne, Johnson and Parker counties, those two, so Weatherford and Cleburne are covered. Once you get to Erath and the other counties out that way, they don't even have a doctor to make these recommendations to their judge. So unless they appointed one in the last week, they might have, but I'm just telling you, based on the Texas Department of State Health Services stuff, any medical guidance they get is based purely upon whatever doctors happen to be in the community and happen to be, working in the hospital and talking to their judge. They haven't had any training. They haven't been appointed to have the training from Department of State Health Services to make those recommendations to their judges and their county leaders. So I do think it's important to put that in context. Once you get out to Erath and most of the other counties out west, They don't even have a Dr. Blocker to advise them.
Further west you go, the less it is.
Yeah, yeah, until you hit these little pockets like Abilene or Midland where they do have some health department resources. And it just is what it is, right? I mean, again, we have a lot of very smart medical people in our communities, but they may be the local, family doc or the local hospital doc. That doesn't mean they've been trained in public health and they're trying to figure it all out right then and there in the midst of the crisis versus having had decades of experience like myself and others that have done this for a living. So keep that in mind. That is important.
I got one too. You did your back of the envelope, back of the napkin numbers on if we don't do this and don't do that. Has anybody done one on how many murders, suicide, child abuse, spousal abuse we're going to do if we close all this stuff down?
So now, Commissioner, I appreciate that. And again, in response to the previous comments, there are different models out there. I would defer those questions to Koch Beatty, and I don't think his folks are here. Pecan Valley, they are our mental health advisors, and they cover 6 counties out here. Koch Beatty and his team have been in regular coordination with myself, with the hospital, with Trish, with others, as a resource. And they specifically deal with the mental health side, the drug and alcohol abuse side, and we're talking all the time about those programs. So he would be best suited to be able to provide some of those numbers and context. I know they're out there, I just don't have them. I trust him to get that because I got everything else. Sorry. Thank you. Sure.
Thank you, Dr. Blocker.
Tell you what, Judge, I'd like to thank Jay, and I know Chris Kaufman and the City Council has worked hard as much as everybody else has. I know the law enforcement is doing the best they can. This is a situation that nobody up here has ever faced, and we're having to do a lot of this by trusting Dr. Blocker, Jay Webster, and the doctors and up in Washington and in the governor. I appreciate what the school has done as far as what they've done, and I would just like everybody to know that the court is trying to do what's right for this county. Some people aren't going to like it, some people are okay with it, but like I've told other people, we're all in this together. In a few months, we'll get through this, and we'll have a better idea of what to do going forward.
I agree. Well, I guess what...
Could I say something, Judge? And this is with all due respect to everybody sitting in here. One of the things that Mr. Iber mentioned when he came to the podium, that he made the comment that most Texans didn't know we had this power. I didn't know we had this power, and I question whether we do. And I'm attacking this from a legal standpoint, and I'm certainly not downplaying, looking the other way, or minimizing the hysteria, fear, and the potential that people have told us is out there with this particular issue. And Mr. Hebert also mentioned something about common sense. And I just can't get through this meeting, and this is no offense to anybody here, it's just looking at some issues, but because I've been looking at this since this started from a constitutional standpoint and a practical standpoint. And reasonable minds are going to differ. So not everybody's going to agree with me, and not everybody's going to agree with y'all, or you, any one person in here. But here's the question that this is bringing up, wherever we end up today. What is the role of government in a situation like this that we have all admitted that we've never been in this particular circumstance before, except when the British were here and we presented them with the Declaration of Independence on July 4, 1776. I'm going to start this because I have a prepared discussion here. Won't take too long, but I want to get this on the record. Ronald Reagan said freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed to them for them to do the same. Which begs this question: is this the generation where freedom becomes extinct? I know that my parents handed me down this concept, and their parents handed it down to them. And I guess my question, rhetorically, is now the time that we call it quits on freedom and the Constitution? I want to read something from the Declaration of Independence that I just alluded to. We hold these truths to be self-evident. Truths is capitalized, by the way. That all men are created equal. That they are endowed by the Creator, Creator is capitalized, with certain unalienable rights, rights is capitalized, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Now, what that means is we, the people, have consented to the government to take care of certain functions. And the Constitution, in my opinion, and there's more legal scholars than me that will agree with this, is not a document that tells you what your rights are, as much as it is a document that tells you what the government cannot do. It's a limitation on the government, at least as it was intended. James Madison said the powers delegated by the proposed Constitution, this was before it was ratified, to the federal government are few and defined. Those which are to remain in the state governments are numerous and indefinite. And the reason I put that in there, and there's more to that quote, but I'm not going to read it all, is that we have become a nation that's dictated to by the federal government, and it trickles down, local, state, etc. And so my question is, has this idea been lost to the ages? Over the decades, we have silently allowed the federal government and the state and local governments, by extension, to take over nearly every aspect of our lives, from light bulbs to how much water you can have in your toilet. In my opinion, we are standing on the precipice. What are we going to do? We are being told that a dire, dreaded, invading virus is sweeping throughout the world like a black cloud of death. We are being told there is no cure for this. We are being told that one can die an agonizing death from this. We are being told to trust us, because we might be able to come up with a solution for you. And excuse me if I exercise a little bit of skepticism here. Excuse me if my pointing out the possibility that maybe we need to tap the brakes here. And excuse me if I'm not quite ready to get on the bandwagon that we should do what we're doing right now with selective shutting downs. Why does Home Depot and Lowe's stay open? Well, they've been designated that they're an essential business. But why are they get to stay open and small restaurants have to close? Why does Walmart stay open and a hair salon or barber have to go home, or a gym has to shut down? So again, I'm coming back to what is the role of our government here? And I'm asking these questions. I'm just asking. Is it to rule at the point of a gun? Let's hypothetically pose this question. What if the sheriff's deputy is out and sees 10 people standing over, 11 people standing over here somewhere? What are you going to do? Especially when I went into Home Depot yesterday and there must have been 100 people in there, and they'd put tape every 6 feet up down one of the main aisles, and that, this is your 6-foot distance. So you can go into Walmart, you can go into Lowe's, you can go into Home Depot, you can go to the bank. There's all these places where you can go, and apparently coronavirus doesn't know to go in there. So I want to get back to the Constitution. The primary purpose of it is to protect our liberties, whether it's the state Constitution of Texas or the U.S. Constitution. And I want to know, and I want to ask this question, are we doing that right now? Are we deciding the winners and the losers with these shutdowns, for instance? And then whatever happened to personal responsibility? I had one of my constituents call me the other day, very hysterical, who's been self-quarantined for the last 10 days. He says he's in a high-risk group, his wife's in a high-risk group, and his daughter's in a high-risk group, and they've been home for 10 days, self-sequestered. And he wanted me to make sure that we shut down everybody. Every business, he wanted them all shut down. And I listened to the man and said, I appreciate your input, and I will certainly pass that down the line. But if you're in a designated risk group, at this juncture, I'll bet you know. And so again, I come back to where's the personal responsibility? You know what's best to do for your children, and you know what's best to do with your loved ones. You know what's best to do for your own health. Or do you have to wait and sit back and wait for us to tell you what to do about your own health? Force you to stay home, force you to go to your room. Well, if you want a nanny government, you may have it. I see serious constitutional issues here with, again, the U.S. Constitution as well as the Texas Constitution. I don't believe that the shelter-in-place orders that are going around right now are constitutional on their face. We don't want citizens to take the law into their own hands. I think we can all agree with that. That's one of the reasons governments are instituted amongst men. But we also don't want the government to take the law in its own hands. Otherwise, have we crossed the threshold into totalitarianism? So I'm going to close with this as far as what we're here for today on this particular order. I've got three basic arguments against it as worded. A, it's not constitutional. B, it's not based on facts. We've already discussed that the facts are still coming in. We don't have all the facts necessary. And to me, that's akin to putting a blindfold on, sending your army out with the blindfolds on and telling them, and just having them shoot anywhere they can shoot. And the third thing is more practical. I don't think this order is enforceable in a practical sense. How are you going to enforce it? And I'm not downplaying the potential of this disease at all, but I will say this, and then I'll close, if I can find it amongst all my. What are the odds of getting the flu? I don't want to downplay it, but let's just talk. I'm going to leave you with this little statistic. This is CDC. What are the odds of getting the flu? Here's a rundown of some basic stats. This is just the old regular flu we get every season. Percentage of U.S. population that will get the flu on the average each year, 5 to 20%. Average number of Americans hospitalized each year because of problems with the flu, 200,000. Number of people who die each year from flu-related causes, 8,200 to 20,000. Average cost of hospitalizations and outpatient doctor visits, $10 billion. Now that doesn't count the off work, the missed work and all that kind of stuff, which we're not even touching the iceberg of what this is going to cost us. So all I've heard today from a lawyer's perspective pretty much is the plaintiff's side of the case. And I'm just trying to at least give in my closing statement on the defense side that we really need to be careful of what we're doing here. And we need to take it in small steps, and we need to be able to tell our constituents that we gave this careful consideration before we made some sort of decision to basically take away their rights.
that it?
Yes, sir.
Dr. Blocker, do you want to respond to anything that he said about that we don't have all the facts in? Because in reading what I've read and what I've read from Dr. Burks, I'm going to argue with Commissioner Eagle here, because if we wait until all the facts are in, it's too late. Can you comment upon that, or Jay, do you want to comment upon? That's my deal. I mean,
Judge, Commissioners, I shared this earlier. I don't have any major concerns, other than the fact that we do have well-established public health law in the state of Texas, well-established divisions between what's federal responsibility and what are state and local responsibilities. My main go-to since leaving the Air Force and coming to do this, again, I trained in Texas back in 99 and 2000 for my master's in public health. And so I did get some grounding in public health law at that time, but then, it's all been through military application and federal application up until recently retiring in 2018 and coming back and coming on board here. But there's a Texas bench book that's provided to all of us that are appointed public health authorities that helps to give us guidance and templates and guidelines for, isolation orders, quarantine orders, separation of individuals and property and things like that as relates to risks associated with a public health emergency. That does distinguish and delineate between the Public Health Commissioner, again, as we talked about earlier, Dr. Hellerstadt's guidance to the governor on the state level, and it says if you have a local health authority, and in this case, I am the local health authority, it allows the local health authority to provide that input to, again, local leaders in coordination with the legal team. And so there are some very specific outlines as far as what can be ordered and what's enforceable or not. And again, Commissioner Eagle, you brought that up at the very start when I was first talking here. You said, okay, what did the Public Health Commissioner Hellerstadt order, and then what did Governor Abbott order in relationship, and how did those two things interplay? And so I would say to you in response, we talk about constitutional guidelines and Texas State Health Code guidelines. We definitely have the ability to be more specifically directive as far as health directive orders. I could order some similar orders, similar to what Commissioner Hellerstadt has done, based on my understanding with Department of State Health Services guidance, of course, related to the specific effects and impacts on our community, and thereby give y'all more specific guidelines to say this is a health risk, this is a health emergency. As you pointed out, Commissioner Eagle, there's too much that we don't know about this particular disease in comparison with the regular influenza. Okay, and those stats are there. And as I shared earlier when we first started this meeting, the best we can do is extrapolate based on historical facts from previous pandemics, which happen to be, for the most part, influenza related, right? Which are different than the average influenza, right? Normally, in the pandemic, particularly the one of 1918, which I've looked the most into and spent the most time on, the biggest difference was, rather than seasonal flu, which, again, generally impacted the very young, very old, folks with other health conditions and pregnant, disproportionate impact on pregnant women, the pandemic influenza of 1918 wiped out a lot of the, about 30% of your average young, healthy population. It's often said that a lot of the reason why World War I ended, the Great War ended in 1918, was because so many folks got sick with the flu, there weren't enough fighting men and left on the battlefield to keep fighting. And so that particular outbreak, and that may have been contributed to by the fact that those battles were going on and those global things were going on at the time. But the fact is, this particular virus, this particular COVID-19 virus, has some additional capabilities that our normal seasonal flu doesn't have. It's spread more rapidly. People have less natural immunity to it because, again, over time, even though flu changes every year, that's why we got to get a different flu shot. There's enough change that you still have to get it's recommended you get a flu shot every year, but you probably have some residual immunity from the flu you got the year before, the flu shot you got before, what have you. So that does help to minimize the impact of influenza any given year on the regular outbreaks. This this COVID-19 pandemic is related to the SARS pandemic. It's the same, it's a similar virus to SARS pandemic that was very deadly across Asia about 10 years ago. And then the MERS, Middle East respiratory syndrome epidemic was also caused by a similar coronavirus in the Middle East. That was extremely, I mean, there were up to 30% death rates for folks who caught MERS. So that's the challenge, right? We extrapolate as best we can based on known pandemics, which are influenza. And then we know a little bit about the SARS virus based on what happened in Asia about 10 years ago, and then the MERS MERS outbreak, which are similar viruses. And so those have tended to be more infectious and more deadly on the whole than influenza is. And so that's why we're recommending those more drastic measures as far as social distancing and things like that, because by the time we have the facts, by the time we have the science, the decision's already been made, and again, you'll have to find it in the history books, right? For any given community, any given country, we'll know 2-3 months from now whether those effects were enacted. So you have a difficult decision on your part. I'm giving you the best advice I can as your local health authority, with, again, over 20 years of experience and training in this, and a lot of our counties around here don't have it. So use it or don't, it's up to you, okay? Use my advice or don't, it's up to you, but I can only give you the best advice we have from historical data and studying what's going on with the World Health Organization, CDC, and everything else. At the end of the day, we have to make the best decisions we can for our community, and we have to live with that. And if anything, I would rather, okay. I can't really, since I'm not an appointed official and you guys aren't paying me, it really doesn't matter. I could say, I'd rather get fired and then for making the wrong call and shutting too many things out. But I can't get fired. I mean, I could get fired for cause. You guys could fire me and hire somebody else, but I don't get paid for it anyway. You understand what I'm saying? The cost of a decision right now and limiting people's movement and activities, we can be more limiting. We have the capability to make more specific public health orders. We can do quarantine orders, which says it's a legal order. You cannot leave home. Right now, it's self-isolation is recommended. If we felt that was important enough, we could do that. And we have the law to back it up. We're not doing that right now. We're not even doing that at the state of Texas level. We're not locking people in their homes and saying, you can't leave, and we're going to have an armed guard outside. That goes back to the enforceable piece, Commissioner Eagle. We don't have enough law enforcement officers to enforce that on 95 households right now. Those are the ones we know about in Hood County. Okay, so somewhere in between, we've got to use the social distancing, we've got to use the self-isolation guidelines, and if it comes to it, I can recommend, I have the authority to recommend legal quarantine orders that then are, are enforceable actions on individuals, businesses, communities for an imminent risk and danger from the terms of public health and safety. I'm not recommending that today. I would really ask that you guys look at this, and as leaders for our community, make some of those tough calls and not ask me case by case to go through and recommend 95 quarantine orders for the cases that are currently cooking out in our community, because those are the tip of the iceberg. We're going to get to a point where that's not even enforceable. We don't even have time to write the orders, as this continues to spread. But that's the best advice I can give you. Again, I apologize if I tend to go on and I don't have written comments to respond, but it's the best advice, and it does come from a place of education experience.
I think your advice is great. I think social distancing and people taking responsibility for themselves and looking at going by the recommendations and guidelines, I don't see a problem with that. But based on this argument, we need to shut everybody down. Based on this argument, we need to shut everybody down.
So, Commissioner Eagle, that's an incredibly difficult decision for any community to make. We know that, I don't know that there's any precedent in any other counties in Texas. There may be some across the U.S. I'm not aware that there are yet. New York is probably the most drastic, has the most drastic measures. Even then, with the size, I don't know how many thousands of people are in the New York City Health Department, but I'm sure it is in the thousands rather than the hundreds as compared to Dallas and Tarrant County. And again, I don't know what's enforceable if they were to try to do quarantine orders on every single household, or rather than just locking the whole borough down, locking all of New York City down with quarantine. So in analog here, we lock the city of Granbury down, or we lock the county down, we enforce that on the borders. No one comes or goes because it's such an imminent risk to public health and safety. It's doable, it's legal. I wouldn't advise that right now. I think that is too extreme, going based upon what we do know about personal freedoms, about the, ultimately, I want to believe that individuals on the whole will try to do their best to, not abuse the others' liberties and freedoms in pursuit of their own. But Commissioner, that's a really challenging issue, and I think, again, you have the power to propose that to this group. I wouldn't recommend it or advise it at this time, based on the context that we have across the United States and across the state of Texas. But that's what I have. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Blocker. Anybody else wishing to say anything?
I'm just glad we got Dr. Blocker.
Me too. Well,
Legals back there, can't forget about the other one. It's a good move for the court to do that, and I appreciate the court going forward with that. This is a common sense thing. 360 it's common sense. Abide what we need to do.
yeah. Please, Chris Kaufman, the city manager of Granbury.
Thank you. I wasn't going to speak, but great constitutional presentation. I think we all agree with you on that. I don't think there's a person in Hood County that would not accept 100% of the constitutionality infringements that we're going through by having to do this. On the other side of that, there's the community that comes together in a social contract, and we're responsible as the leaders to do what's best for the whole instead of the individual. That is your job as a governing body, is to serve the whole. And that's our job at the city, to serve our whole. This is a heavy decision. And I don't know if you saw the city council deliberate on this last week, but they did. And it was a heavy heart that they had to do that. We also recognize and adhere to Edmund Burke, the great philosopher, that you can't indict all of society. But there's not enough police and sheriffs in jail space to take care of all the violators of what's been passed in the last week. We're asking for consent. We're asking for the citizens to understand how serious this is. And here's what we're saying we need to do. And if there's an egregious offender out there, our law enforcement has the tools, because of the action that's been taken, to enforce something to deter bad behavior that's causing other people to get sick. And so I can't imagine y'all not being trained through your TAC about emergency management requirements. I can't imagine that happening. Y'all have to go to school. Y'all have to go to those classes. The state government requires you to go through DEM training. And through that process, 20 years ago, I did that, and I learned how powerful this body is. You are the most powerful governing body in the state of Texas. You have the impact, the ability to impact every citizen in this county individually. As a corporate group, you have that ability, and it's a huge responsibility. And I don't expect you to make a decision easy. I'm not telling you what decision to make. I'm just telling you, we understand we can't enforce everything that we've adopted so far today. We don't have the manpower. The sheriff's even shorthanded with people sequestered. That's what we're dealing with, and it's just going to get worse. Last week we had 1 diagnosis. Today we got 6. I expect by the end of the week we'll have 18, based on the exponential numbers that's doing in other places. So at some point our hospital, if we do nothing, will be overrun, and we'll be setting up another hospital at the conference center, and we'll be asking the National Guard to come help us set that up, and the Corps of Engineers. Just play it forward a little bit and understand that could happen regardless of what we do here. So anyway, that's all I've got. Thank you for serving. Thank you for running for office and enduring that battle, and then sitting here today and dealing with your heart, your philosophies, your thought processes, and doing what's best for the county. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chris Kaufman. I just disagree with Dave about one thing. The federal government, and Jay pointed this out to me, and I've been thinking, I've looked it up also, is that the U.S. Constitution and only has the powers that are enumerated. Article 10, the 10th Amendment, reserves all powers not explicitly granted to the federal government back to the state. And as the state, we have, and then it's broken down from the governor, and then to the county court. And I agree with what Chris has said. We all have the emergency management. We have not only the right, but the duty to protect our residents. And I consider it the highest duty. And that's what I've said all along, is that I represent all the people of Hood County. And by representing the highest representation I can give them is to protect them. And this has come down to a life or death. I think there's enough evidence out there that if we relax what we've put in place right now, that it's going to overrun our hospitals, and it's going to put a lot of people in danger. That's what I said. We have beaten around the bush with this, and we've been talking here now for 2.5 hours, and I just think that the executive order that I signed, I'd like to vote on it by the whole commission here to extend that order as it's written. I'm willing to take any modification that anybody would like to make, but I'd like to move this along here and say that I move that we extend the executive order that I signed and put in effect on at 11:59 on March the 25th, and to March 25th, 2020, and extend that. I don't know. What did 7 days? Is that what you would think? Because
April the 7th, Judge, is what you put on the order.
okay, to extend it for 7 days, as it is, as an order of the Commissioners Court. So that's the motion that I would make.
Extended from the 25th, 7 days?
Yes.
I'll second that, Judge. And also, Judge, I'd like to make one more comment, because I'm not much of a talker. I called my preacher this morning and asked him to pray for this court and pray for me, and he said, James, he said, your duty to the people of Hood County is to take care of them, protect them. And I think that's what we're doing. And I'll second that motion.
Okay, do you want to say something?
Yeah, before you vote, just for clarification, because when you wrote it up to be in effect until April the 7th.
Yeah.
So what you said, though, was was for 7 days from the 25th, so I just want to get clarification. Are you taking the order that you want to keep in place till April the 7th, or?
No, I think I said April the 7th or until further orders. I usually put that in there. I don't know.
7 days from April 7th to be April 14th. I think that's what you're.
No, he didn't say that.
Well, he did say he wanted to extend it, so when do you want to extend it to?
Well,
I think that will clear it up.
I think extended 7 days from today. That's what I would like to. Yeah, from today. Because
That's what it's already there, though.
Yeah, you've already written in the order that you wrote, you've extended us to April the 7th, 4 days after the governor's expires. So,
okay, well, what I'm saying here in the Commissioners Court, though, we can modify it any way that we want. My executive order, I can modify it any way that we want. I'm saying we may get some news in 7 days that we could relax something, or we could get some news within 7 days that we have to come back here, that we have to make it more stringent. Is that possible?
so it makes it.
What did the city do?
They opened, Chris, y'all didn't have a end date on y'all's, did it?
The council adopted it to be in effect until they terminate or supersede or amend it. So it's open.
Okay, well,
Today's the 30th.
So if you do it based on what your language is for the commissioners.
Well, I got
today-
the order right here. The executive order shall take effect at 11:59 PM on the 25th day of March 2020 and shall remain in effect until April the 7th, 2020, unless terminated or modified by a subsequent order. So that's what I'm saying. We can modify it.
Which would be April the 6th, 1 day shorter than what your order says.
Yeah. Well, we could modify it anytime. When does the governor's order expire?
April the 3rd at midnight.
April the 3rd?
Yes. But based on what the president said yesterday, I would expect that order to be modified and extended. Just want to put that on y'all's radar.
Well, whatever we do, it's going to be superseded by whatever the governor says. But I don't want us to be without anything, without any order, not anything, without any order. So,
Well, if we went to April 7th, we could always come back and modify it
Yeah.
between now and then.
yes.
Judge, I might just say that the city implemented this because we do not have the authority to execute a Class B misdemeanor on that governor's orders without adopting that declaration that we adopted.
Yes.
So we have no authority to carry out what he asked us to do without adopting that.
And the second reason for our order was that and the fact of the cost recovery. I can't track cost recovery and do any of that stuff without you actually having a declaration on file.
You know, by us being able to call a meeting within an hour, you know, if we decided to relook at this, we have that power, right?
I just wanted to make sure on the dates when he started talking, so that's all I wanted clarification for.
Judge, why can't we just leave the date the way it is? I think what you're asking, does the court want to continue on the order as written until it extends per this contract? Isn't that what we're trying to do?
It's my executive order, yes.
Yes.
My executive order.
And I think the motion would be, we're going to leave it as is unless a commissioner or somebody wants to make a modification or a change, they could, but you've made a motion to leave it the way it is until the end date.
Yes.
Just the way it's written.
That's it. April the 7th.
You got that motion?
So there's two motions going on, so which one?
No, we're one motion at a time. I made a motion, let me just redo it. I'm making a motion that this Commissioners Court extend the executive order signed by me on March 25th, 2020, and just exactly as written.
And not extending the date, and leaving the date the way it is.
That's right, exactly as written. Is that your second, Commissioner Deaver?
Yes.
Second by Commissioner Deaver. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, just one more thing, just to let the audience know, you know, we've been in here since 10, 2.5 hours. We did this last week on about Thursday, and we had twice as many people in here, and we were represented by the city, by the EMS director for the state, and had a lot more people, and we went through this same discussion. So it wasn't an easy decision what the judge did, but we did it based on the information that we were getting from Jay and from David Blocker, the city council, and everybody involved is what brought the judge to make that declaration. So I just want to make sure that everybody knows this wasn't done just because the judge thought it up. We went through this for 2 or 3 hours last Thursday to try to get to this declaration that's there. So that's my only comment.
Yeah. And it's good information from Ricky Reeves as well. That was very important, and he had a lot to say in this. So is there any other discussion? Okay, I'll call the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Okay, motion carries 4-1. Okay, I guess the special meeting that was called today, and I don't know if we can do it right now, but I'm going to go ahead and try to address it based upon what Roger Deeds has said. I mean, I've been sitting over here agonizing and thinking about something. I mean, my first impulse when I got the letter from Mr. Airbird the other day or last night, Sunday night, was to ask him if he would like to go work in the emergency ward at the hospital. If he doesn't think it's contagious enough or whatever, it's not that bad, so go work at the emergency hospital. But I thought better of that and just invite him down to see if we could do that. What I'm really frightened about is the people that are on the front lines. I'm talking about actual patrolmen, policemen, investigators, constables that have to have real interaction with the public. I'm not talking about people that are in county government offices like myself and my 2 administrative assistants. I'm talking about the people that are in Kathy Lang's office, or in Tanya's office. I'm talking about the people that are really on the front lines. Jay Webster that is working with the people like this. Dr. David Blocker that we have to do. I'm talking about jailers. I don't know if there's a number that would pay me enough to go into a jail and be a jailer, especially now in these times here. These people are critical. They have to be there. Governor Abbott issued an order that we can't release dangerous criminals like Los Angeles evidently did. They released 1,700 the other day out into the population. And I would like to see just a discussion as to how many patrol deputies do you have and investigators that are in contact with the public. I mean, you said you have 124, but out of those whole 124, not all of them are in direct contact with the public. And I wish that, I don't know whether the hospital down at Lakeside, are they compensating or doing anything to increase the salaries of their people that are working with all these sick people? And then I fully appreciate what Commissioner White said. There are a lot of people out here in Hood County right now that are drawing zero money. There's no way for them to earn a nickel. You put all of that in context, again, it's one of these gut-wrenching, heart-wrenching decisions. Do we want to at least, your patrolmen and your investigators and your jailers are receiving a salary. It's what they contracted for. And yet I see, well, we don't want them coming up with maybe psychosomatic illnesses. I think I have a fever, or I think I can't breathe right. We want to keep them coming into work, just like with all the constables that were here, with all of their employees too. But I don't know, I want to see if anybody else would like to amplify on there. I know that Commissioner White has said what he said. I'm saying what I'm saying. Does any other commissioner wish to address it? Or shall we talk to Becky and see if there's any money anyplace else to see if that's even feasible? I just don't know. Sheriff, do you, and then again, if we agreed to compensate people in your office that are out there dealing with the public that are more likely than your sedentary people to contract the COVID-19, would they be upset, and would that destroy the morale of the other people in your whole department thinking, hey, we're all this in a unit, and while we're not out on the front lines, you got the patrolmen and the investigators and stuff coming back to the EOC and to the Sheriff's Department and filling out their paperwork, and we're filling out their paperwork, so we're going to be in contact with them, and it may be not a direct deal, but we're a secondary deal. You know, I can sit up here and be as an attorney, I could probably argue just as eloquently on either side to give them extra money for working in a hazardous pay situation or not? But I don't know what to do about that. Does anybody else have any
I got
thought?
an idea. This is just a suggestion. But we've got an order that just was voted on that goes until April the 7th, which is next Tuesday. And I'm wondering if we don't set another Commissioners Court meeting, we're 7 days out right now, for Monday, and we can actually put that item on the agenda.
I agree.
Because it's really not on the agenda to talk about today, and we can put that item on the agenda and come back and put it on the table. That's my suggestion.
Because we're going to need a ton of information on this.
Yeah, and I didn't want to just, I guess I did throw it at you, but I don't know the judge of Tarrant County very well, but the judge does. He can call him. So I wanted you to be able to know what's out there and get your facts. So the number I said originally wasn't 124, it's 144 employees. As far as deputies, I got 52 deputies, and they all end up, that's counting investigators and even the lieutenants and all that, they have to deal with stuff. Answer a question earlier, we've transported 4 mentals in the last week, and we've dealt with a whole lot more than that. And I've got a lieutenant that helps deal with that too, and then another lieutenant that helps coordinate, and the sergeant too, that helps coordinate the transfers. So I've got, can't remember the exact number of jailers and transport people, but it's like 45. So it's quite a few people that have to go hands-on with dealing with a lot of these people all the time, so.
Have you had anybody in your department refuse not to come?
No, I've got good people that nobody has refused to come. I've been told I've had some upset people that they have to come when other departments are not having to come. And I explained that, the sheriff's office is an essential service, and, you took this job for the good times, but here's the bad times. I still got to have people to work. So, the clerks that are inputting warrants, tickets, different things like that, finishing the reports, it's some of those that have had the questions. None of my deputies have questioned that. Nobody's come directly to me other than my management people that have said there's some people that aren't real happy, but everybody's been coming to work.
We can call Commissioners Court within, 24 hours now? We don't have, or 1 hour. 1 hour we can call for court. We don't have enough information right now to make the decision, which can't do anyway in this court. But Judge, I guess it's going to have to be up to you to get with Becky. Is the money there? Kind of understanding what it is, and you can call for court, and the Commissioners Court come back whenever we're ready. I'm not so sure we have to wait 7 days to make the decision. If we can get the information we need to make that decision, call it an hour and have a Commissioners Court and make a decision one way or the other.
Okay. Well, we got that deal, but let's go ahead and set a Commissioners Court meeting right now for next Tuesday. I'm sure that there's going to be things that.
You'll do it Monday? Because your order expired. Well, yeah, we can do Tuesday. I'm sorry for interrupting.
It doesn't expire until 11:59
You're right.
on Tuesday, so we can just keep it at Tuesday. So why don't we just go ahead and set another Commissioners Court meeting on Tuesday, April the 7th, 2020, at 10 a.m. to consider and take all appropriate action regarding the COVID-19 virus and how it affects Hood County and Hood County residents. Okay? So.
Yeah, you don't need a motion to do that.
No, we're just going to go ahead and do that. And like Commissioner Cotton just said, is that should some emergency arise, and I'm in daily contact with Jay and the sheriff and Dr. Blocker here, if something comes up, we'll just call a meeting at an hour's notice because of this emergency. So, is that sufficient?
Yep.
Is there anything else that anybody, any commissioner or anybody else has that we should address at this time?
Well, if I could, I would ask Jay and Dr. Blocker to go to lunch. We could talk some more about this, but we can't. So that's all I got.
Hey, we can have pizza in the ELC, and you said one corner, we'll send the other.
Yeah, but there's going to be 2 of us.
He meant he'd like to go ask you to go have lunch at a
There ain't no place to
restaurant.
have lunch.
But
Well,
there's
you
no
can go to-
restaurants open. I know,
That's what I was headed, yes.
that's where he was going. I
I think
got
you
you.
could go to Dave's house, so he'd invite you there.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm adjourning the meeting. Thank you all very much for coming.